Welcome, folks. Thanks for joining us. Pleasure to see everybody. Let me see here, make sure this is coming through on that live stream, coming in hot. We are coming in hot. Heatness confirmed. So, if this is your first time joining us, thanks for joining us. If you're a returning viewer, by all means, welcome, welcome. Happy October. Can we believe it's October? Because I can barely believe it's October. So, we're going to dive in pretty quick here. Rajat, my friend, hello, how are you? Matt, how are you, my friend? This is good old Beeple Clips on the scene. Our chat is hype, so by all means, as we're going through the discussion and as I'm talking to Noah, by all means, throw any kind of questions, comments, anything you want to see more of, anything you want to see less of, unless the thing you want to see less of is me, in which case I will not secede. Think about that. But regardless, throw it in the chat. I'll pull it in. We'll talk about it. We're always happy to kind of take this in whatever direction seems to be most useful for folks and most entertaining. If you ever have a topic or guest that you'd like to see on our live streams, please let us know. Just send us a quick little email at support@interactiveimmersive.io. There it is. There's a little beautiful support. Oh, hold on. Let me fix my... there. I can't do it. I'm not good at it because it's mirrored. You know what I'm talking about? Anyways, you send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. A lot of these streams that we're doing now are going to be guest focused and talking about the work that people are doing, what kind of tricks they're using in Touch Designer, Notch, basically whatever. So if you are a person who thinks you might be an interesting guest, or you know someone that you'd like to see on a live stream, send us a quick email. We're always happy to figure some of those things out. As well, if you are new to the stream, and actually probably more importantly, if you are a regular viewer, this is our new schedule. Second Friday of every month, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern time. That's when we're going live. It's the real second Friday. Don't worry about the weeks. Don't worry about when the first is. Just count the Fridays with the month name. Second one, we're on. Easy system. Easy system. So with that said, today I have a very special guest. And actually, I noticed there's a spoon in the background. This was my snack yesterday. This was filled with peanut butter. So I am basically like a walking, talking dog is an accurate description. I think Noah would probably agree that that is an accurate description of me. And so today's special guest is a really good friend of mine. Somebody who... I mean, because the funny thing is Noah's listening, so I don't want to like hype him up too much because he's going to blush before he gets on screen. But probably one of the few people on the whole planet who I would trust if something happened to me, I could say, Noah, you take over, and I know it would be like done probably even better than how I would have done it. So I think that's big words because there's like not, I don't even know if I could like fill one hand with that many people. So Noah is a Touch Designer veteran. He is the founder of Hard Work Party, which is a company whose name I really love. He's been tapped into the culture, the industry for a very long time. And he can confirm or deny, I think he's the one who introduced me to Eric Andre, which was probably one of my favorite shows and or things ever. So, with that said, I'm going to pull up my good friend Noah here. Noah, what's going on? You're on screen, bro.
Nice.
How you doing?
How do I look?
You look great. And I like the Simpsons reference, the 3D background.
Don't put it in the chat if you know what this is right here.
Do you know what this is?
My fingers are disappearing.
Put it in the chat.
In the background subtraction.
There's no prize for the first person who guesses, but street cred. You could get to flex a bit and say that.
You need the full proper name.
Full proper name. And to be fair, I kind of guessed it, but it was like I said the wrong name for it. So
yeah, you got halfway.
I got half points.
Half points.
How you doing, my friend?
Good.
Good. Good.
I mean, all things considered, I'm hanging in.
I think that's
I'm excited to be here.
I think it's a pretty fair sentiment for a lot of people right now. Is that hanging in feeling, and we can even start our discussion. So for folks that are watching, we have a really cool project that Noah worked on, which actually, if you were to explain like I did an LED permanent installation, it doesn't really wrap in how much stuff is actually going on in the project and a lot of the cool techniques that you used in the project that we're going to look at today. So we're going to look at that project. Noah's going to give us a tour of the project and show us some of the cool techniques he used inside of that, and even when you were showing me yesterday, I was like, oh, that's like that's like hyper smart stuff.
I had some help.
I was going to say, was it me? But I was like, no, I don't think it was me at all.
Yes.
Well, a little bit though, just a tiny bit.
I'm sure you helped. It took me 2 years to do this project. I'm sure you helped a bunch of times along the way. You probably didn't even know you were helping on this particular thing.
There you go.
So I just ask you these random questions.
Yeah, that's like
just one little weird nugget.
Yeah, yeah.
You're on a need to know.
I'm like you know what I'm like? I'm like salt. I'm salt. If you were making the project dish,
you're like MSG.
Yeah. I'm the flavor enhancer.
Exactly.
You just
flavor enhancer.
Sprinkle it on top.
Flavor dust.
And actually, Rajat's saying, "Hey, Noah, I want to thank you for introducing me to the amazing world and content of Elbers." There you go. There's our boy Rajat's in the chat saying hello. So
I didn't know I did that. I'm a big fan. I'm glad I'm here. I get a lot out of the HQ. I know you introduced me as a veteran, but I feel like a permanent beginner. And this type of content that you make, not just the interview stuff, but the tutorial training content. Like I said, I have beginner mindset, but also there's just tons I don't know, and it's 99% of the time when I'm like stuck for something. My email from HQ comes in that week, and I'm like, oh, that's exactly the thing that I was trying to figure out. Like I never really dipped into widgets. You talked about this week, you talked about how once you get used to Touch Designer, you start to stop paying attention to the release notes.
Yeah.
And that's totally true.
So true, right?
And also it's just impossible to keep up. And I didn't get into widgets. And then I had a project, last month or something that I was like, I really want to build a UI for this, and I don't want to use 2IK or, whatever. And so I went and did I watch everything on 2X, but I did the widgets training on 2X and built my widgets interface in 20 minutes, and it was awesome. And your training was exactly what I needed. And that's hugely helpful.
Wow, geez. Now I thought I was gonna make you blush. I'm starting. Is it warm in here? Or is it just me?
It's a very important utility, and everybody, I'm sure hits you up for help with all kinds of stuff. But I'm working with another program called Aximetry right now, which is really poorly documented. And so my project right now is to try to get you to dive into Aximetry and create the unofficial documentation for that, the way you've done for Touch Designer. Because if you think Touch Designer has limited documentation, you should see
the Aximetry one does look a little.
It's bonkers.
Let's just say has room for no batteries included. When you get here's a perfect example. You know what Aximetry is? When you buy the cheapest version of something on the internet, like an electronic, and it shows up and it's just the thing in the box.
Right, no charger or anything.
No charger, no batteries, no man. You just have the thing, and you're like, well, you wanted the thing, figure it out. So that's what Aximetry kind of looks like. So
that's pretty much what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
I mean, they have 6 videos that are each 15 minutes long that are front to back, how to build a quick project, and that's the documentation with transcriptions. So it's anyway, the HQ is needed in other departments. You should branch out.
We're branching. It's coming soon to a theater near you. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the kindness. Sure. So, before we get to that project, though, I thought there's a couple of fun things we could talk about. I say fun things, but I was going to transition directly to COVID, which is not fun. But
good segue.
It's a very good segue. That's an Eric Andre that segue for sure.
Yeah.
But we don't have to spend too long on this because I think at this point in the world, everyone seems to be talking about COVID and what it's doing. But I'm always interested in one thing, which is, have you changed anything about your business and practice because of COVID, or are you riding through and hoping that things get solved a little bit quicker?
Well, I mean, as an example, I have since college been putting myself to school in terms of marketing and documentation and stuff like that. And so for this project that we're talking about today, I put into practice, this project was done at cost. It's a very large scale project. And then I came out of pocket after finishing the project to document it. I flew back out to Colorado. I rented equipment. I spent, I put myself up when I was out there, and I spent extra time shooting the thing thoroughly and was going to cut documentation and put out a case study and everything. And I didn't because COVID, it just doesn't feel like the time to be banging the drum about how I can do permanent installations for hospitality. Like, you know, kind of trying to keep that powder dry, I guess. And I'll put this video out, I'll finish it and put it out when it seems like there's a market for that again. But that may be a bad call, because I think some businesses that feel like they're still going to keep to the course, at least for the moment, maybe at the point right now where they're like looking ahead and they're like, who's going to do my thing for my lobby or my, you know, office or my restaurant or something like that. And I'm not, you know, flogging the latest thing that I finished. But I would say that that's an adaptation I made. I mean, aside from that, you know, as a sole practitioner, my business has always kind of been reacting to what comes my way. I don't do cold pitching or cold calling very often because it never, ever works. It's probably a shortcoming of my own ability to do that stuff. But like, I'm not getting business that way. And so as a reactive kind of thing, like my business has gone towards virtual events this year. And like, I've been just really working hard on a couple virtual projects, a virtual platform and a virtual event that I built a platform for. And it reminded me that I used to be in the event business, and it's terrifying because, like, especially for streams and stuff like that, like it happens terrifying. At a time, and it either works or it doesn't. And, you know, we've done events together. I mean, like, I still do events, like the business that we're in, like we end up doing things for events, but like being the centerpiece of an event where, you know, if it goes down, if your thing goes down, the whole event goes down, just makes you like lay up awake at night, just thinking like, okay, is this piece redundant? And what is my failover strategy? And like, you know, these kind of things. And I don't miss that. So it's funny that like when COVID came along, I got pulled back into the event business to a much more involved degree than I was pre-COVID. But that is happening.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think I felt a similar thing when we were running the championship. Because like you're saying, like, you know, we've been on events, but usually we're like the thing on the side or the thing for the opening. And, you know, in the worst case scenario, you never want the worst case scenario, but they just turn your screens off and they just like proceed with the event as normal.
Exactly.
But, you know, like I remember when we were getting up to the championship, I'm like, so if the stream goes down, what happens? Like the whole thing goes, the event's over, right? Like you're saying.
I'm having versions of that conversation every day. Yeah.
It's terrifying.
I actually have 3 stream projects going on right now. Like 3 major stream projects where like my box and my software and all that is like the show. Like, so then you're thinking about how do clients recover? You know, how's the end user recover? Like what kind of redundancy do I have on streams? What kind of redundancy do I have on hardware? Internet connection, power, blah, blah, blah. It's not a fun thing to be wargaming when like you're used to kind of like, how blinky should my LEDs be? Yeah. You know, that's just a lot more fun. And the nice thing about installations, especially permanent ones, is like you build them up layer by layer where like it really is just by the time you've answered a question, the question remains answered. You know what I mean? Yeah. Although I would say with this project that we're going to talk about, we had a scary scare over the last couple of weeks that you should remind me about. Once we've talked about how the
scare, was it works. Having me on the test? Was that the scary scare?
You on the test? What test? No, I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about something else. You're talking about the LED one.
Colorado project.
Oh, the LED one had a scary scare. Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, we had a couple terrible weeks recently that turned out just fine. But we should tell that story once we get how this thing works.
So Rob's saying Elbers needs a contest for a new background. I mean, I could just download another Beeple clip, but you guys are really you're driving a hard bargain.
We're on Skype. You can do whatever you want.
Show Ninja saying already tired of XR because of COVID. Welcome to TV vibes. Yeah. And then Rob's asking, what was Noah's contribution to the championship? I mean,
nothing.
Yeah, we talked about it a couple times.
Yeah.
Because you're a busy dude. You're like a busy individual.
Busy guy. I gave you a little bit of input on like my gut on the championship at the beginning because I was tech director touring for Cut and Paste for years, which was a similar thing but for graphic design. 3D animation and motion graphics live in front of an audience in rock venues all over the world. And I did that for 2.5 years.
And I should say, actually, that, because it was such a quick moment. I remember like we were just having a couple conversations. It was over like 2 weekends or whatever, just like chit-chatting. But actually, I should say that was a very influential to how the championship took shape, because I think when I started talking to you, I was like, hey, we're going to run this optimization tournament. And you gave me two pieces of advice that were like pretty influential in how we kind of changed the direction. One of them was like, normal people don't care. Optimization is not important. Like there has to be visual things on the screen.
Yeah.
Which really shaped the direction we took with a lot of the challenges and making like the outputs visual and like cool stuff to show.
Yeah.
And then also you were like, yo, you should get some like guest judges that are well known and celebrities and like stuff like that. And you know, we did our best and got some cool stuff going on there. So
I wasn't there, but yeah.
Wow.
Aside from that, yeah. I sat in judgment regardless.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't invited, I did judge.
Yeah, I think it's a typical, when you get to the high end of the touch designer stuff, judging becomes your default reaction to things. Yeah.
Yeah, you're certainly judgy.
Yeah. I'm judgy, but I have a good filter.
I'm excited to show everybody my work from a year ago.
Yeah, I have a good filter, so it feels like I'm not judging sometimes. So that's interesting. So yeah, COVID and like, you know, we've been pretty open COVID on our side of things, which is because we were online kind of already. We've been pretty like stable through the whole thing and just kind of navigating the ship. But you know, COVID's starting to go on for a little while now, and I feel even ourselves are getting to the point where we're thinking, hey, are there some expenses that aren't like critical right now that we can kind of like tone down a little bit just in case, you know, keep that savings padded instead of, you know, because there was a couple things where like, oh yeah, you know what, like we got some money in the bank, let's invest, let's start burning some of it to get these other things going, and then we're like, yeah, you know what, like maybe don't maybe don't yet. Keep
right at the beginning of COVID, I had a guy say to me, cash up.
Cash up. Wow, I like that expression.
Cash up.
Cash up.
He was like, if you got family, you got people you care about, people you take care of, cash up.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a funny way to put it. It's just kind of a evocative way to say that.
Which is very ironic, because I think next week's blog post is like, should you buy an RTX card? But I digress. That's the first time I've ever said that. Normally I say don't ever upgrade your hardware unless it's like the end of the world.
Right.
But
yeah. So
when we're getting to this project and we're talking about, you know, this Colorado project and the LED, I mean, do you want to give a little bit of a high-level overview of it? And actually, maybe what we can do is we can jump into your screen share, show some of the images or videos of it. Then we'll actually hop back maybe into this like side-by-side, because then we can talk a little bit about like the process of it, and especially like your philosophy of building it, which is interesting because I think secretly most people have this problem, but they never get to talk about it, which is, you know, big projects are usually with big companies, but what happens when you're a solo person or like a studio of two, and all of a sudden you have a big project to deal with? Like, how do you even manage? What's the strategy for it? So I think you have like a lot of good insight on that side of things. So do you want to show some, do you want me to hop over to your screen and you can show some?
Yeah, sure. Do I have to hit share screen? Or
no, you're already sharing. I will just switch my scene. But I see the touch designer and I see my face on your screen still.
I'll go back to DVR here.
There we go.
How's that?
Yeah, let me hop over.
So
hold on a second.
I'm just gonna roll.
I just remembered I got to turn down your gain over here as well. Yeah. Okay. You should be good.
Oh, do you have audio from the screen share? Do you hear the music? I don't know. Anyway,
I don't. I might be able to, but it might be choppy. I don't know.
No,
but I don't have it enabled by default.
I just wanted to know if I was going to be talking over this. So Rosetta Hall is a food hall and nightclub in Boulder, Colorado. That obviously I built a LED installation here. It's a modular, distributed, fully custom, permanent LED installation made out of custom LED panels, custom control boards, custom aluminum platonic solids, the icosahedron and the octahedron, custom mounts, custom. You
basically made everything. Just say it. You made everything from scratch.
Yeah, the stuff we didn't make from scratch were NTEC Storm controllers.
Like the physical LED.
Well, the physical LED is
it was custom LED. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I'll show you what those look like. We really said, okay, we're going to build this club. We're big fans of the piece that I did for a nightclub in Brooklyn that's now gone called Glasslands, which was one of my first LED projects where I did this kind of like cheapo DIYs. These are the circuit boards here. Cheapo DIY distributed LED, modular LED installation that were in tubes up on the ceiling. This was a reaction to what they liked about that. So we did what we always do. And when I say we, it's mostly me, although I had some very important help who I will credit in a moment on this thing. But the beginning of the process was just me talking with the client, and I did what I always do, which is go interview the clients. Everybody who's a stakeholder, everybody who has a say in whether or not this thing is a success, what to them success looks like, what's really important, subjectively, objectively, what does this thing need to do? What does this need a service in the sense of like what will help like the business operate around this thing, but then also that are really important to the stakeholders on the process. And
did you do that for everybody? Like you literally went through and talked to like a lot of people?
Fortunately, on this project, there weren't that many. But on the more recent one that I'm doing now, like I talked to 25 some people within an institution, a museum. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to go and make a design in response, directly in response to that. And then when you present the presentation process with their words exactly.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Framed up in a way that's like, this is what we heard, and so this is what we're proposing. And it helps them see that you are responding to both their needs and their wants, and that you're trying to set everybody up to win.
Yeah.
So we did that with this project, and what that led to was a modular system. So we knew because of the construction on this site was going to be pretty chaotic. There are kitchens in this one room. There are there's a big commissary in the back, renovation of an existing historic building. This is a pretty large space, and we knew that the reflected ceiling plan was going to be how would I put this? It was going to be aspirational, and that there would never be a real reflected ceiling plan of the actual.
Yeah.
So I brought on an architect friend of mine, Ben Gray, who helped also design the mounting system for these things, which we might look at in a little bit. But like these are mounted by the GC on site with this incredible mounting guide that Ben Gray created, which I think I can probably actually find here, and it's just so cool. Let me see, on-site documentation, setup diagram. You got to see these. I'm just like so proud of these. Ben Gray did these for us. Pete.
Yeah, do it. No, it's okay. I mean, it's basically Chrome skinned.
Ugh. Is it really? It's a Chromium.
Yeah, they switched over to Chromium recently.
I did not know that. So I just want to show this incredible guide that Ben Gray did, which looks like an IKEA catalog, but like this is how to like mount the J-box to the transformer down to the low voltage junction, which goes into the whip tail that goes. These are our mount points. You mount these all unistrut things with all thread through them. These are these like couplers that are tensioners that grab these all thread rods, and then we mount this mount plate with more all thread here. We level this out, and then I mean, everything's custom here, so we needed to really be very clear about how we were responding to the construction conditions on site, as well as the existing as-built condition, as well as the kind of murkiness of like what was actually going on. And I don't want to talk too much out of school, but the original architect on this project was separated from the project because the building ended up being at one point 7 feet shorter, and then like 7 inches shorter than it was originally
That's
drawn.
like pretty big margin.
And like, so we built this system when we had to redesign over and over again in response. So you'll see in the software that we built, software modular because it meant that we were mounting units one at a time in a distributed way, rather than some big monolithic like grid or like kind of wavy like serpentine, mesh thing or something like that, that would also have been appropriate in a certain way, but like would have meant that we would be, first of all, designing and building this thing here in New York, and then, or I'm in Pennsylvania now, but when I was in New York, and then somehow disassembling that, sending it out to Colorado, reassembling it and putting it up in the air, or we would be building this big monolithic thing out there and like waiting for the go time, which was a whole other process in this project, was like waiting for the go to actually start mounting this thing to the ceiling, because we had to wait. There's a C of O thing, and these are like it's about the anyway. We had to wait for them to get the okay to actually start hanging things up. So we would have had this big monolithic thing, either in pieces or built as a unit that would be in storage somewhere and like waiting for this go, and then we would have to bring it in and then hoist it and stuff like that. So anyway, this distributed modular thing was very much in response to what the client's needs were. And I'll just play some clips so you're not just staring at a boring screen while I'm talking
And
here.
just to ask the question in there,
also,
because you were brought onto the project, like you were saying, like really early on in the process. This wasn't a thing where, you know, the space was built and they're like, where do you want to hang them?
correct. I was brought on before they even.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
check.
I lost your audio.
Hello.
I don't know if you can hear me. Now I can hear you.
Well, I was just saying, because it sounds like you were brought on really early in the project and not so much at that point of, it wasn't a project where they're like, hey, look, come and look at our bar. Where do you want to put them? Like, you didn't have that.
100%. Yeah, I was brought on well in advance of them beginning the plans to build the thing. Oh, I think I lost your audio again. Did I? First? Oh, no. Okay. I'm sorry. I was brought on well in advance of the plan to build the thing. And I worked with the architects from the very beginning to advise on what I saw as the RCP need in coordination with our fixtures. So one of the needs that they had for this piece, I call this the Mon look, which really kind of felt like totally out of keeping with the rest of the thing and turned out to be really popular, so we left it in. One of the purposes that this piece serves is as the primary lighting for the venue. It's both daylighting and the primary light for nighttime. You can see when they're off, it's pretty dim. And so the owner of the place knew that I'm kind of a fanatic about circadian lighting, about lighting that adapts to the exterior during the day, and then at night provides like a warm, like very little blue look that is kind of healthy for the human body. So these serve a daylighting purpose as well. And during the day, this clip, but during the day they follow the course of the sun with the exterior color temperature. That matches. So there's a ramp that these push.
You do love that stuff. The first time I came to your house, your lights like automatically started changing.
Yeah, you know I'm nuts about this. So also, this was kind of a audible. It got called at the last minute, but the client had built in a hue system as RGB. Like every single lamp in the entire facility is RGB on a hue system. And I was talking with him through the specification of every lighting fixture of the venue from the very beginning, and I told him that hue was too consumer, I think, for his need. And from a cost standpoint, it just ended up being hue, which has been okay, but it has been giving him some trouble, as opposed to like a Keitra system or something, which would be like 10 times as much. But anyway, on site at the end, like when we were installing, he was kind of like, hey, so, I don't know if you could help me with this, but I'm banging my head against the hue system, trying to get my phone to be able to like add all these different zones. There's hundreds and hundreds of fixtures in there from hue. And he's like, I'm trying to get, control over this thing, and it's really turning into like a nightmare. And like, is there any way that you could help with this? And I stupidly like opened my mouth like while we were installing on site and said like, oh, I'll just take control of it. So I did that. So that also you can see like when you look at any one of these looks, every single light in the space, except for including in the bathrooms, I believe, is under control of my system. So every time we trigger a look here, the hue lights change as well, and that's why the whole space appears to be, in a color scheme, is because it is. This look is out of focus. It's a shame. I don't know if these playing smoothly on your end.
They're a mix. They're a little bit choppy, but also apparently your audio is a little bit delayed from your mouth. So we may cut the Skype and then return it on in a second. But apparently it's not terrible yet. So we can keep going and talk about this a little bit. So this is interesting. So you were brought on really early in the project, and then you had this experience of and kind of building on that workflow that you really try to talk to a lot of the stakeholders and figure out like what it is they want, which, you know, it's so funny. It sounds so simple, like, hey, figure out what they actually want and then just like give it to them. But I feel like in our industry, because there's so much art involved in it. Listen, I'm not a hater of art, but people know I harp on about art because I think art makes us do weird things that don't make any sense sometimes. And one of those things I think is not listening to the clients, because we think like, well, I'm the artist. Like, I know they hired me, that I'll bring the vision. It's like, you know, most of the times, like, dude, just talk to see what they want, and then like, you know, use your vision, combine it with that, and then everybody wins, right? And that's why I was so surprised, because I think it is funny to me that it is surprising that I hear somebody say, oh yeah, well, I interviewed like all the stakeholders a bunch of times and I'm talking to them regularly.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, the way I look at this is that like this thing is in their living room, not mine. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not, you know, whenever I do a permanent installation, it's one of the things that I do not budge on, that I think I maybe could be even a little paternalistic about, but I think it's really important as somebody that's creating a permanent installation, is to make it really clear to the clients that they're going to live with this thing for a really long time. Like, this system is engineered to last minimum 5 years, just the LED panels alone, and then they're modular and they have a whole backup of everything. So we can, I mean, they'll just start getting dimmer at that point, but like, this thing's permanent, you know, it's a permanent installation. And so to me, what's really important that, you know, maybe I won't hear from the client, and that I may even have to fight for over the client's objections, is that, and we were talking about this earlier, like, I want to build permanent installations that have complex inner lives, that don't reveal themselves at first at all. They don't reveal their true nature. They don't reveal everything they're capable of. They don't, they hold a lot of stuff back, because, you know, we know this about lots of things. I mean, there's an extreme end of the spectrum where like the best pop music is extremely accessible the first time you hear it and like never gets tired. So, you know, like on the Michael Jackson end of things, like, okay, but like there's a huge uncanny valley in the middle where things, you know, my experience with music, for example, like if I listen to an album, the first time I listen to the album, if I love it, I probably will not love it in 4 months. And that may be because I play it too many times, but that also might be because it lacks richness. And conversely, like, you know, there's stuff like a Tecker or something where like the first time I hear the album, I'm frequently like, ooh,
yeah,
man,
what is this? What are we doing here?
I can't even get a hook into this thing. I don't even know where to start with this thing. And those tend to be the albums that in a year or two, I'm just like, oh my God, like this is one of my favorite albums, and you know, really grown on me. So I kind of aspire to that latter thing with projects like this, where like, of course I want it to be gorgeous the first time you see it, and you know, have innate aesthetic value that is like undeniable. But I also want the behavior of this thing so deep that that years from now, the people who live with it, the staff at the restaurant, the owners, the people who attend the nightclub, if it's a lobby piece, the people who walk through that lobby every day, I want them to be finding surprise in it, and to be feeling as cohabitating with something really complex and rich that they don't fully understand. Because that's what I think, you know, we get dopamine from surprise, right? We get joy from discovery. And if this thing only had like one really gratifying in your face mode, or like in each mode really only had one behavior, we wouldn't be able to accomplish that. So all the looks that are built into this thing, and there's dozens of looks, have durational behavior that will first of all, like, you know, and this is kind of like in a stochastic, like, you know, early electronic music sense, will never repeat, because there are beat frequencies essentially happening where, like, you know, something takes 7 minutes to repeat, and then something takes, you know, 4.33 hours to repeat, and then something takes a day to repeat, and those things will overlap in ways that are unpredictable and will result in you know, a space of possibility that is unknowable in a certain sense unless you live with it for years. That is intentional, and that also means that, you know, as we were discussing earlier, like there are going to be moments with this thing that I've never seen before that'll happen when I'm not there, that like sometimes I get a text from the client and I'm like, they're like, all the lights just went out for like a minute, or something like on dance night. I'm also okay with that because I'm from New York and like we're used to dance clubs being like super dark. And I was telling you that my aspirational aesthetic with this thing was grown and sexy. I really wanted this to be like feeling very adult and very kind of rich and mature and subtle. And so we get these kind of candlelight kind of looks like this that kind of burn and move around. And like there's also periods of darkness, and I like that a lot. I always said to the client, like I think the appropriate level for luminance in a nightclub should result in you being unsure whether or not you're attracted to the person you're looking at across the room. Like if it's bright enough that you can tell, then it's not very sexy, in my opinion. And even on the dance floor, you shouldn't really be able to make out the person across from you very well. Now, these lights are cranked up for the purpose of this documentation, but in person, it's pretty dim. But there's also these kind of larger scale durational effects with this that result in sometimes periods of darkness, where like the lights are not being lights, and I'm okay with that. Obviously, these beam lights are always on, and the lights in the kitchen stalls are on to a varying degree over the course of the night. But as far as these fixtures go, they come and go. And like for me, it's kind of like music. Like it should have dynamics. It should be, it should breathe. And like in great classical music and great jazz music, there are moments of quiet. And just because I have these lights and they can get really bright doesn't mean they should. But you and I were talking about how, for the purpose of this documentation, I did want to catch a lot of these kind of special moments on camera, which meant that I had to go in while I was rolling. Go. Kind of hack my system to do the thing, so there are these things where I have a ramp that's going over the course of like 4 hours, and only when it reaches 99% does this really bright thing happen. And that's only if this look is on when that's happening, or that's only if two of them happen at the same time that you actually get this one special flashy thing that happens. And I came back to document it like 3 months after I put it up, and I had to kind of rack my brain about what things that I had built in that way and kind of like figure out how to fake trigger them for the camera like over and over again, even though they don't normally do that very often.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because this really is more of because especially even though this is a venue, it's not like this is like an LED wall where VJ comes in and puts their clips up. Like it's none of that. It doesn't have does it have it does have audio reactive capabilities, but the point of it, it's not like the it's not like a cans around the stage that are just like bouncing with the beat. Like it doesn't do anything like that. Like it sounds like it's subtler in a lot of ways. And do you find that approach for you helps you get work or keeps clients happier in a sense? Because I can say from my point of view, right, like I love hearing that. In practice, my life has been very different, right? And mainly just because of the people that are hiring me. My life is usually the other side of the coin that you're talking about, which is that the person, the user experiences this for 10 minutes. In the 10 minutes, they need to see the whole thing. They're not hanging out there. The client, they're gonna know exactly what this does after seeing it 3 times, and they're gonna know the steps of the ballet, right? Like, so that's the experiences that I've had from my career. Now, do you approach it your way always on projects, or is this something that was special for this one? Are there business benefits to kind of that approach, or is it more just like a personal, artistic philosophy at that point?
Yeah, I think it's the latter thing. It's a personal artistic philosophy. I mean, I think, in our business, we are, as I said, this has a functional purpose. It is the daylighting in the venue. But obviously it's a huge aesthetic element of the venue. And at night, it's what makes the place a nightclub. And it's got both function and aesthetic qualities that are both really important. And so, for me, I identify that it's pretty much every project I do has like a huge amount of judgment associated with it that are bearing on, functional aesthetics, on user experience, on on pure visual aesthetics or audio aesthetics. When we make things in Touch Design or we make multimedia things, you're making a million little calls that contribute to the feel of something and the art of it. That's the art of our job. And that, I think, is where, clients don't know whether or not you're good from a technical standpoint, right? I mean, like, if they may have been recommended to you because somebody else had a great experience that didn't blow up, great. That's a good reason to get recommended. But like, we've all worked with people who have a great reputation, and then you work with them and you're like, oh, this person's a liability.
That's a real talk right there. Well, I'm not going to name some names, but there's been some, I have seen the extreme of that.
Yeah. So you can't hang your hat, I think. I mean, you can, but hanging your hat on being good, like technically, and being buttoned up and being safe and like having a good track record of delivering is one thing. But you don't get calls for things like this because of that. Like, I got a call for this because of the same kind of aesthetic decisions I had made on the Glasslands project, which was kind of a similar project in a certain sense from the brief, although obviously the budget was much smaller and it was cheaper and everything like that. But the point that I'm making is that for a differentiator in our line of work is your aesthetic and is your philosophy, and that's the artistic, side of it. So to me, this is kind of an anchor thing for Hard Work Party. That it says it on our about page. We make creative. We make digital artworks and installations with complex inner lives.
Which is a sweet one-liner, by the way.
Thank you. I will be. I mean, it's at the core of what I'm doing. So, like, when I meet with clients and we start talking about the what and the why, I'm going to be telling them, like, this is what I do. This is what you're buying, and hopefully there's buy-in before we ever get to the point where that would be something where we wouldn't never find out when the thing was already in the air that we disagree on that philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't win the business without it because I don't keep that secret. You know what I mean? That's the kind of something that I'm offering. And like I we've both done a bunch of work with AV&C. Like, I've learned from David at AV&C, their calling card in a certain sense is a process that they do with the client, which, we were just talking about the process that I put the client through, where I interview them and like bring their words together and present them back to them. Like, that's a very small version of what AV&C does, among many other things. And maybe David's going to kill me for paraphrasing his business model this way, but I've learned a lot by watching that. And to me, like, the philosophy that you bring into the design of a project like this is what you're selling before the project ever gets built. And that's a huge differentiator. It's really, really important to have that. Not just, even if you never sell based on it, you should obviously know what it is for you. Because you can operate without a philosophy, but you're reinventing the wheel every time in terms of like how you make decisions and what your guiding principles are. And after a while, I think you've got to start thinking to yourself, like, why do I do what I do over and over again? Like, and how can I get better at making the kind of decisions that go into the work that I'm doing so that I get more out of the work, what I want to see.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And before I kind of throw in my 2 cents on that one, Roy's mentioning, could you name an example of where that workflow comes in, Elbers? Roy, sorry, I know we're getting to this question delayed, so please let me know which workflow, and I will certainly name some stuff in there. And also, I didn't realize Show Ninja is Brandon. Yo, what's up, my boy? What's going on? No, you're definitely Brandon Epperson is not on that list. Brandon Epperson is on the nice list. Santa's bringing presents for Brandon.
I love Brandon.
So I was gonna say, he's asking. I know, Brandon. Send me a message later. I'll give you some names in confidence. But so the funny thing is, I have felt kind of what you're talking about, and I'm always telling folks these days, especially even like in the business talk I did on YouTube, there's more to just selling your skill. You have to do something else now, because I think that era of skill-based career, it's not coming to an end, but I think it's getting harder. Like, I think, if this was 5, 6, 7 years ago, like when I started, because that was my whole calling card, right? Like, to your point, I'm the thing that you shouldn't do now. I was the guy who buttoned up, good delivery. I'll slam the gigs. I'll get it done. That's like Albert Sarkabi on the business card. He'll get it done.
Although I would say at the level that you do it, it can be a distinguishing thing, but not everybody can be at the top.
Well, and I think that's the only thing that's given me the longevity, is that I pushed it to that level. But I think if I didn't push it to that level, it could have been like a totally different story. Because even now, over the last couple years, to your point, like, and I always make this funny analogy, which is that I accidentally became a firefighter, right? Nobody has ever called me when a gig is going well.
Not only that, man, but like, from a creative standpoint, and again, I know this is like one of your things that like you kind of don't, you profess to not care about this, but to me, I kind of I was going the path that you were going, where I was just like the driver, basically.
Yeah, the driver, that's a good one too.
I began, oh, here we go, this is the daytime look. I began to realize that, I was always the bridesmaid and never the bride.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Which from a creative standpoint, and in part, I don't know what I could attribute that to. I mean, part is just opportunity thing, which, like, if you haven't been thinking about like making opportunities for women and people of color in the industry, like, this is a good reason to think about it, because like you never get a call to do something out of the blue. Like, you always have to have some demonstrated track record of doing it, and so I had to like convince clients that I already had as like, who thought of me as a technical utility, to like let me do something creative and aesthetic from the beginning, because I was always executing somebody else's. I'm not saying everything that I ever worked on for everybody else is stupid, but I'm just saying, like, I was constantly executing somebody else's design that I thought was like poorly conceived and didn't have its heart in the right place, and that was a really frustrating place to be for me. And so over time, I came to the conclusion that I really needed to, I needed to take over the whole process for myself, and to be in charge of that. And just to put a bow on that thought about making opportunity for other people, like, if you're the technical person that's executing someone else's vision, and there is not an aesthetic or creative or a kind of artistic figure attached to the thing yet, and it's something you want to do, obviously that's a great opportunity to move in. But if it's not something you want to do, that's a great opportunity to make space for someone who will never get that opportunity unless somebody says to the client, like, this is your guy or your gal, like, and that's a great time to make an opportunity for someone who's on the outskirts of our industry, because people of color, women, are like completely underrepresented in our industry, and that's a great time to make space for someone like that. But anyway, like, I was always the bridesmaid, never the bride, in terms of like executing other people's aesthetic vision, which frequently I felt was distasteful, So like, having this philosophy was born out of getting opportunity to build these things, but also like, how do I package up what my vision is in a way, like you said, a one-liner that I can sell.
Well, because I think the danger is, and we both realized it, but kind of took different routes, was you went back to the square one on the project, and or not the project, but on the process, and we're saying to yourself, you know what, I'm going to like revamp this thing so I can start taking control of that creative process. Whereas for me, I'm not going to say, like, I don't want to say it's too deep. I was in too deep, but by the time I realized that, like, I am just the firefighter, no one will ever call me when the project is going well. They're just going to call me when it's like, it's too late, and I have to run into the burning building and like pull the touch designer bodies out of here and like bring them back to shore. For me, it was lucky because at that time I'd already been doing so much educational stuff, and I was like, you know what, I kind of really like this educational stuff. Let me kind of transition and make that kind of like a really big part of, my work, like make that my work life, essentially, instead of having to constantly deal with projects. And, we still do like the odd consulting thing here and there, but I mean, most of my 9 to 5 day is literally just doing teaching materials and doing this stuff and content creation, etc. The YouTube videos you were mentioning, the blog, blah, blah, all this stuff is like, that's my full day. But I think it's a good warning to new folks in the industry, right? Because I think there still is in the air a little bit of that narrative that if you get really amazing at like the technology side of it, that you're set. And I think that's going to lead a lot of people to unhappiness, unfulfillment, or just, you know, like, I always joke about like Unity slaves. No offense to anyone who's like a Unity developer, but, you know, it's because in the game industry, that's what it is, right? You become a game developer and you're just like somebody else's Unity slave from 9 to 5.
Well, you know what got me out of the situation that you're talking about is in 2015 or 16, I rebranded. I filed a DBA. I made a new logo. My company was called Ancillary Magnet, and
or spell it, by the way. I literally can't spell it still.
Spell it, yeah. And nobody was able to reach me via email or anything. But all of that aside, I was pigeonholed as a executor of other people's ideas, and so I hung out a shingle as hard work party with the few case studies that I had that were my own creative work from top to tail. And when people called me to execute other people's vision, I really thought twice about it. And I, in some cases, turned it down on that grounds. I was fortunate enough to be in a position that I could do that. But I told them, I was like, I'm not building other people's stuff anymore. But if you want to start, you know, next time you're I don't want an RFP, but
no RFPs,
next time you're starting from scratch, like think of me. You know what I mean? Like keep me in mind. And I'll tell you what happened. It did with the existing clients that I had. It didn't work. I will say that I probably have no clients that made that transition with me. None of them could think of me differently. They always kept calling me for the same thing. And I know why. I mean, the way you think about people is pretty fixed, especially when you've been working with them for years. And so they would get an opportunity to do something. They would bid it out or come up with the creative with someone else. And then they would come back to me when the idea was already sold and say, can you build this? And I get it. You know, there's never going to overcome that. That I was fortunate enough to be in New York in a great community at the time and like have lots of contacts and be able to, you know, continue to reinvent. And that's what I did. But you got to be careful if you're going to do that process that you don't lose your livelihood. And it's a position of privilege for someone like me, you know, to have the background that I had and have the support network that I have and, you know, anything else, and to be paid as well as I'm paid and everything, that I could make that transition. But like, again, if you know someone who's on the outside looking in, who you think has potential or like, you know, hasn't been given an opportunity, like that's another place to make space for somebody to reinvent themselves. You know, so even on like when I'm hiring people on Upwork for like random projects and stuff like that, like start with people of color, start with women, you know, make space for people who have less of a track record if you still think that, you know, they can get the job done for you. And, you know.
So Brandon's got a interesting comment. Sometimes identity death is necessary. Have done it a few times. I think Brandon, actually, you should be the next guest, my friend, because you have seen some things. We've seen sunrises together in the morning. Yeah,
that's a great way to put it. I mean, you gotta kill your past identity in order to move on, or at least you gotta make a clean break from that. Especially if you're a sole practitioner, you know, I only have so many hours in the day. So as soon as I say yes to this thing that's not that appealing, my phone rings for something that's way better, and I'm booked. So I'm very fortunate to be able to do that kind of thing. But like that's what it takes in order to move from the purely technical practitioner to the creative. If that's the jump you're trying to make. And
actually, Brandon's saying nobody wants to hear design ideas from a stagehand. Oh, buddy, I need one of those Peppy Frog like tears. That's that's too real.
I mean, if you're one of those people that comes wearing all black to the gig, like at least make it a turtleneck. You know what I mean? Like, don't if you're wearing show blacks, like you got to do like Elvis, like wear a blazer or something, because people will think of you as a stagehand. Even if you're the one who actually like executed the hand wavy vision that they gave you.
So if we were going to summarize, because I do want to get into the technical stuff. So hold on, I'll summarize. I'll give my 1 sentence advice to folks out there that have just heard us talk about this for an hour. Although we did talk about a bunch of different topics. I think for me, kind of that last one is always an important one because it hits close to home. But you can also give a 1-line summary about the process that you've been talking about, kind of like this, working with the clients, guiding them through, doing interviews, really like, I guess, making them feel like a part of it. Or if you want to talk about that idea of, you know, like being the sole person with a giant gig, or the identity death. I know we didn't like get into it that much, but the identity death / leading with philosophy, like an art philosophy. Well, you give me. What's your one sentence? I was gonna say, give me your one sentence pitch. What's your pitch?
The thing that I have most to offer in this category, I mean, we did cover those things pretty well, but I think the thing that I would say that my personal message associated with this is like, if you're in the business of doing permanent installations, don't be so eager to please. Is the kind of core of the complex inner life idea, and what I'm trying to express in a nutshell is that like people have to live with your thing forever. So like, don't give them like a candy pop 30-second loop in like C major, like reserve some blue notes and like make the thing durational, and think about the entire lifespan of your work as an opportunity to remain in conversation and keep the attention of and surprise and delight the people that have to live with your work for years. For years. I just had a conversation with this client last week where they were like, I'm looking out 5 years and I'm already sad that this thing, will start getting dim then. So like, let's reorder all of the LEDs that go into this project in order to keep this thing running, in the future. So to me, that was like a reinforcement of this basic premise, which is like, give your client durational work. Permanent installation should be durational. Think about years. What is this thing going to do to surprise and delight and continue to engage the people who live with it 5 years down the line? I think
that's pretty wise. That's pretty wise. And actually, Aurelian just joined us. Hello, my friend. Thank you for joining us. Brandon saying wise words, Noah. And Roy's asking, do you use any update system? And I guess...
Well, yeah. So I think the question is about...
Content refreshes and stuff like that is probably what I'd imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, the client actually just gave me some of his PPP money to build a whole bunch of new looks for this. And in addition to that, we realized that we had missed a huge opportunity, which we'll see in the Touch Designer patch, but there is a projector screen right here. The reason these are laid out the way they are is because the projection screen drops right in here. And the projector is right above this shot right here. Actually, it's hidden behind this beam, which was a huge fight with the AV integrator to get the goddamn projector out of my shit.
Classic.
And I had to redo. I did his lens map like year after. I redid his lens map like 4 times in order to convince him that this was possible. This lens geometry. But anyway, we are going to do content for every look that also does the screen, so they can drop the screen behind the DJ. The DJ is normally up here. The DJ can come down here in front of the screen, and the screen will drop in and do stuff for every look. For example, for this look, I do some kind of triangular tile tessellated thing. But anyway, I'm doing a big look update. The look system is entirely modular, so I can show in a moment what that looks like. But every look is contained, and then there's, as we're probably going to talk about, there is a transition system, which makes it so every time looks, even though the looks themselves are incredibly durational and have this stochastic thing where they find these spaces in like multi-dimensional space that they've never been to after they've run for years, they're eventually going to reach this thing that they've never done before. On top of that, the interpolation between the looks and the transitions between the looks is also stochastic and will result in the thing appearing to be reaching states that it would never have reached in 1,000 iterations. On top of that, just as it's going from look to look, and it responds to music. But I will be building new looks for this as the client kind of commissions them.
Yeah. That sounds like the plot of Tenet, by the way, which, no spoilers if you haven't seen.
You keep plugging it.
It's a really good movie.
We don't have movie theaters in the United States.
I know.
We can't have nice things anymore.
Wherever you are, try and see Tenet. It's very good. So I would say, before we transition into that technical stuff, I guess my one-liner would be, which is going to sound super aspirational and corny, but I think it's true, and you could probably attest to this, which is like, if you have a vision of what you want to do or be in the industry, try to really go towards that and keep your detours very short, if at all, because a detour quickly becomes the main road without, like exactly what we're saying, without a severe like identity death, rebrand, or like, any of these things. A side road becomes the main road, becomes the road very quick. And that's that's what happened to me too, right?
To people. The way I put that is, if the job requires you to become an expert in something, consider whether or not you want to be the expert on that thing. Because what's going to happen is your phone is going to ring for that thing, the last thing that you did.
Yeah.
Your phone is going to continue to ring for that. Is going to continue to ring for the last thing that you did. So if the client calls up and they're like, oh, we have this like really complex like CV blob tracking thing with like a high-speed camera and something like that, and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting, but you're looking at it and you're like, this is like a 5-month project and this is going to require like me really digging into this topic and like I'm going to have to reinvent the wheel here and all this. Think to yourself, do I want to do more of this? If you're fortunate to be in a position where like you don't end up repeating yourself over and over again, that's great. But if you're a sole practitioner, the last case study that you put out, especially if you're doing case studies, which you should be, make sure you're documenting and doing case studies. The last case study that you put out is going to be what clients call you for, because they just, we pigeonhole ourselves that way. And so like, just think really, this is exactly what you were just saying, Albers, but like think really carefully is like, do I want to be the guy? Or gal. Yeah. Do I want to be the expert on this thing?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting take and probably a good place to transition into talking about expert level touch designer tricks, because there's a lot of good stuff happening in your project. Even last night when we were talking about it, I was kind of getting a little excited about it. And actually, Brandon's saying exactly the case with XR this summer. I'd probably, right? Like a couple people will probably take XR gigs and you will never get anything but XR phone calls ever again.
It's true. Yep.
Okay, so this project, before we dive into it, let's give a couple of just kind of like bullet point overviews of all the things going on in the project, because there's Space Mouse. People love them some Space Mouse. I don't like a Space Mouse, but you and Hal seem to love the Space Mouse.
It was so necessary for this project.
It does feel right for this one. It does feel right for it.
Well, the scale of my model in this project is it's a big building, and it's in, I don't remember what units I used.
Probably
but
meters?
I think I used
inches.
So, touch designers in meters. I think it's in inches. So, like, using the built-in mousing around and all the different viewers was just bonkers. Yeah. So I had to build Space Mouse capability to, like, fly around in all the different places that I wanted to be, just to get up close to these fixtures when I wanted to like look at like, is this triangle behaving the way I think it is, or like, is my pixel mapping right? All this different stuff. I really needed to dive into that. Because
you also have a previs, which was going to be the follow-up point, is the Space Mouse is used because you have pretty extensive previs. I would say like you've got different cameras, you got the Space Mouse, you go orthographic in different ways. There's a VR version. Like you went really
right. I put the client came over well before they broke ground, and to see where the project was at, because I had samples of the LED product that I was testing on, and I was doing some of this previs stuff, and I've been sending renders, but like obviously moving around really gives you a sense of it. And I put the VR helmet on him, and he was like, "Oh my God!" He was like, "I have never been in my building before," and I was like, "Your architect didn't put a VR helmet on you?"
Ooh, subtle burn. Your architect didn't put VR on you.
Oh, the architect. That particular architect can take a
that was the one that was like 7 feet or 7 inches off, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. So we got into this spot where we are right now, and he was looking around, and I'm going to show you, there's this counter right here is right next to the bar right here, and he was like, there's a choke point. He's like, I was going to put this popular vendor like right in this stall. I have the building simplified right now, but if I go with the unsimplified building here, that was the simplified. I think that toggle's messed up. Forgive me, some of this stuff.
Yeah, and we should also say, so this project is from a build from last year, and it was last night, right? The time is not my friend anymore, but it was last night we were on the screen share trying to make it uncrash on launch. So most things are working. Most things are working, but there might be some things that are like we had to like delete all the audio stuff because it was making it crash.
Yeah. But I put the VR headset on the client, and he walked into this space right here in between the bar and the vendors, and he went, "Oh my God, this is too tight for the popular stall that I was going to put here. Like there's going to be a line, and they're going to have nowhere to go." But also the architect was like doing this in SketchUp. This entire project was done in SketchUp. So like every time I had to re-import, I had to get rid of so much geometry because they had like these SketchUp default high poly plants in there.
Oh God.
Anyway.
Classic. And the vents are all like huge high poly vents.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, when you do a project like this, you're going to learn that the HVAC contractors um, do not draw their system before they build it.
What?
And
They
so
just
one of the
walk
things
in and
about
start putting the
they
pipes?
refuse. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, they just put up what they're going
I
to
should
put
join
up.
that industry.
So,
That sounds like up my alley. Just like show up and start doing stuff.
well, it was terrifying because, first of all, well, I mean, yeah, there was so many things that went wrong with that. But like these fixtures, if you remember from those videos, are like right next to the HVAC over here, and these are actually like the way this was originally drawn was like, and anyway, this water main wasn't supposed to be there, and like so all this stuff, this huge HVAC system, these air handlers, these are really close to these. Over and over and over again, I had to fight to be like, show me what you're going to do. I need to make sure that my fixtures are in the right place, that I don't need to move this, but we'll go into this in a moment. But this system that I built allows me to actually move fixtures on the fly, and they remap in 2D, 3D, and kind of one-dimensional space as I move them. So I can literally drag these around. I'm not going to do it, but I can drag these and I can change their height, and it moves everything in the data, and then that gets spat out into a model that my architect was consuming and conforming to the as-built plans and the RCP that he did, because the architect didn't actually do an RCP. We had to build our own reflected ceiling plan, including the ceiling joists, in order to make that drawing document that we did.
And I think that's when we were talking earlier and you're introducing the project, that idea of being modular. I mean, this is kind of what we're talking about in that sense, where you made these lighting units, with a bunch of data and some functionality, and then you kind of tell the system, okay, these are going here, these are going here, these are going here, and that allows you to kind of keep on that flexible, workflow and pipeline where, like you're saying, someone says, oh, well, there's a pipe there, and you're like, okay, well, I just move it over. And like you were saying, you drag and drop it in your previs, and all of a sudden, like, everything updates, and mapping, LED, content, like the whole pipeline knows that this has changed.
Exactly. Should we go through that? Should we talk about that? Because that's
I mean, let's start, because I think the only other thing that I was going to say was so there's like Space Mouse and previs. The modularity is really cool.
Oh, the Space Mouse.
Well, I just say Space Mouse. I bring up the Space Mouse because it's really I'm not a big Space Mouse guy. I don't know, but
look what I can do here. Look at me. I'm just like flying around. You can't see my hand, but I'm just super relaxed. I look great. I smell good.
Do you look great?
And
do you smell good?
I don't know if I can't tell if I'm on camera, because apparently my streaming isn't great, but I'm going to tell you,
it's
good.
I
look great.
Yeah, you're good.
And look at this. I'm just like flying around. I did not make the Space Mouse talks that I'm using. I believe, I don't remember who made it. I got it from the forum, but I got to give credit where credit's due, because it's not trivial the way this was built. But I recommend that you do not try to roll your own Space Mouse thing. Space Nav, here we go. Who did this? Did they give themselves
that
credit?
is quite a comp right there.
Oh, it's interesting, because what it does is it caches the position that it was last at, and uses that as a offset to begin the next transform. So the entire time you're operating, it is making a transform off of the starting point, and then it caches that as the base position for the next move. This person did not take credit for this. I modified it a little bit so you can save positions and stuff, but I can't take credit for this. But I would definitely recommend, if you're going to use a Space Mouse,
look up Space Nav on the forum. Probably will find it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then the only other thing I was going to mention before we dive into like specific stuff was, you have a really interesting concept for the content creation side of things in the project, where, because these are LEDs, everything's coming down to that one-dimensional, pixels in data eventually going to DMX out. So everything has to end up in that DMX space, but you've made like pretty complex tooling and tool set that allows you to work in full 3D, 2.5D, like volumes, 2D, 1D. Like, you can work in any kind of dimensionality you want, and you've made the tools that kind of convert you down the pipeline to one-dimensional, aka like DMX out.
Yeah. Should we dive into that? I want to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, let's do it. There's no, on a big project, there's no real good place to start. You just like pick a battle. And Mikkel's here joining us. How you doing, my friend? Welcome.
Hey, Mikkel.
He's saying great haircut, Noah. Digging the style.
Oh, thanks. I did it myself. I call it the arrogant soccer player.
He says my hair is good too. Thank you.
I don't even know what the back of my head
I remember when I had hair. It was nice. But this is easier.
So,
do you know how quick I can shower? So quick. Yeah, let's do it. And let's start. I think at the end of the chain makes sense, like kind of like what we were doing yesterday. So this is a DMX out.
This is the least fun and one of the hardest things to do in the entire project was just to shuffle up my crap to DMX, but I couldn't even explain to you how it was done. I believe you helped with this thing.
I love shuffling. Shuffling is the most fun I have. Yeah.
The worst. Mind shattering. But here you go. So this is one of the things that I can't take credit for that I'm pretty proud of is all my stuff, my LEDs are 16-bit. So I'm working in 16-bit fixed RGBA. I don't need the A channel, but this is the only fixed flavor of 16-bit because the RGB 16-bit is float. So anyway, RGB 16-bit fixed. And then I break this into most significant digit and least significant digit of a 2-bit, 8-bit, two 8-bit
pairs
values. MSB, LSB, yeah, exactly. And then I break that out. And then what's feeding into this is from freepatentsonline.com. I found a formula for RGB to RGBW. So I'm beginning with RGB textures, and then once I get here, that alpha channel becomes my W value. So I'm pretty proud of this shader. I'm happy to share this, even though I don't own it. I got it from Free Patents Online. And so what you can see here is that I literally have 3840 pixels in my entire installation. Each one is 16-bit. Each one is RGBW. So I have 8-bit values per pixel. But I'm working in pretty much every context to arrive at a one-dimensional 3840 by 1 16-bit fixed RGB texture. This is my output for everything creative that I do in the program that is meant to color these lights. I'll get to the hue thing in a moment, but all those lights that we were talking about that are on the rafters, that are in the stalls, the kitchens, that are over the bar cloud, that are in the lobby, that are in the bathrooms, every single fixture in the entire venue is a hue fixture. It was not my choice, but when I arrived on site, the client said, I'm having trouble with these hues, as I said, and I was like, dumbly, I just opened my mouth and I was like, I'll take over. And so I used Matthew Reagan's hue, pi hue thing. Don't look at this. This is the worst piece of code that I did. But this guy right here is where the control over the hues goes out to another touch designer operation, and I'm controlling the hues as part of every single look has a hue look. But going back to this, just a reminder, we're going to 3840 by 1. That's our end texture for everything. And what that allows me to do is to build...
I'm putting the reins on the train for a second.
Uh-huh.
So 3840 by 1. First we got two questions. Well, one comment, one question. Matt Felson is saying, I came across your MSB LSB forum post recently for 16-bit LED project I just worked on. And Mikhail's asking, couldn't your shader be more efficient if it was...
Notice he didn't say whether it worked or not.
That's the polite way of saying it. Probably needed TLC? Yeah. TLC needed some TLC. Mikhail's asking a good question, which is, couldn't your shader be more efficient if it was a square rather than a line? Yeah, but it's 3840 by 1. Pixels. So, I mean, at that point, if you're squeezing out that much efficiency, just close Touch Designer because you got bigger inefficiencies happening.
I mean, I can do a lot on this thing without, look what this is taking just to show it. I mean, this thing needs to run at 40 FPS because it's a LED project. I know it says 30 here, that's my monitor. But this thing runs 40 FPS and it's headless. There are no graphics coming out of it aside from this one texture. At times when there's a transition happening, there are two of these. And granted, I'm doing fluid sims, I'm doing
you got lots of stuff going on.
Instancing and blah, blah, blah to create these things. But even the two-dimensional textures that go into this are pretty low resolution because they don't need to be. And I got in deep with Landon, who is critical to some of the really mind-shattering thinking that went into the 3D, 2D, 1D transformations that go into this thing. But we had these arguments about super sampling and resolutions and stuff as to what actually is going to have a end result once you've kind of mapped your way and texel fetched your way out of it. But in the end, there are no pixels involved in this entire project. There are really none. This is the heaviest thing that I'm doing is this previs, which is actually fairly heavy if I have the building model on, but I've ripped out as many polys as I can. But this isn't running in the real project. I put a fake HDMI head on this box just so I could have a context to any desk into. But like other than that, it's not rendering a graph.
And Matt's also saying, not laughing at it, just coincidental that I came across it. So I just want to go high level. If you go back in that DMX, if you don't mind, just so that we high level wrap up this component. So all of your content comes in that 3840 by 1 position, and then you have
this comes out of my
all of the content is in that format.
Brightness, hue, saturation,
and then you do the RGB to RGBW shader. And I guess for folks that haven't worked with RGBW pixels yet, like the idea is that they just represent white and shades better, right? Is that a fair way? You got a better color range on them.
They provide more intensity in light value parts of the color range. So if you are representing light colors, which is to say colors that have low saturation, they can be brighter. If the white node, the white node is going to have a color temperature. That's just the nature of white. It's somewhere on the black body curve. It's still going to be white. But if you have a warm white, you have more space in the amber part of the color wheel to get more color fidelity. But I'm using cold white, so my white pixel is somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 Kelvin, if I remember correctly, which this formula does not account for, and is something that I fudged. I don't have, even though I'm like a level 3 certified ISF's color calibrator, it was beyond my ken at the time that I did this project, and probably still is now, to use colorimetry to create a 3-dimensional LUT to translate accurately colors in, let's say, RGB color space into output on these pixels. And instead what I did was, when I got on site, I just sat there for a week looking up at my stuff and like redid all my looks based on the information that I had on site. Obviously with LEDs, dimming capability makes a huge difference in terms of like how do they behave when they dim. And then 16-bit was a huge step. We originally prototyped this on 8-bit and decided to step up to 16-bit because the cost was kind of negligible. But anyway, what we ended up doing was just fudging the white color temperature and assuming that it got us in the neighborhood, which it did. But what the W pixel gets you is the brightness in the light value pixels, especially if you're doing white. You can go to a full white that is all RGBW at 1.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's double bright.
It's going to be some flavor of white, but it's very bright. And when I was showing these clips from the project, like in the daytime look on this time lapse, you can see this is providing the day lighting. Whoopsie daisy. I think I just dragged the time lapse into my medium folder here, and whatever, it doesn't matter. This time lapse, you can see that this is actually providing all of the lighting even during the day for the venue, where otherwise it's just indirect lighting from this skylight, which is quite large. But this is Colorado, and the days can get short, and this is all hue lighting, which really doesn't provide a lot of light. So these are at full white RGBW all the way up during the day.
Yeah, because then the other side of that is the 16-bit value, which I think a lot of people probably won't be familiar with on the DMX side of things, but because DMX, RNet and DMX is just those 0 to 255 steps, now it's becoming more of a trend that people are moving over to 2 8-bit channels per
trend.
Yeah, it's a trend. What are you gonna call it? It's a trend. No, I don't mean trends are things that happen. Like when a couple of things happen of the same thing, it's a trend. I mean, it's probably going to become the norm. Yeah, I'm not saying it's like a trend that's going to disappear. It's just a trend. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
But the 16-bit, okay, let me rephrase it. The 16-bit is a new methodology for getting more color gamut control out of lighting fixtures, whether they're LED or anything, right? Is that an accurate way of describing it?
I mean, for us, we custom made these LEDs, so it was like a decision that we made early on in the process after prototyping with 8-bit. We were like, too crunchy. We want 16-bit. So we inquired with the manufacturer. It was a pretty negligible cost in terms of the overall project. And so we just upgraded the LEDs to 16-bit. I mean, it was just the integrated controller. Obviously, the LEDs themselves are kind of, in a certain sense, analog or digital, but you know what I mean. But the then that just all that unlocked my ability everywhere upstream to create 16-bit textures, and then to have 8x more data going to my my pixels, which made for buttery smooth, like, fades. This is, our first test with the 16-bit panels where we just taped them up into a, oh, I hope this plays. Let's see what happens. I taped them into a VLC.
Yeah, and Brandon summarizing correctly says, Elbers who doesn't think 60 FPS matters over 30 feels like he needs more than 255 color dim steps. That's the most accurate statement I've ever heard.
Man, brutal.
Sorry, you were saying.
No, I'm just, this would look like Nintendo if it weren't 16-bit. These are, we're really torture testing this thing with smooth fades here, and you can see that it's pretty smooth. Obviously, it's really hard to photograph these insanely
and it's a
bright
bit
LEDs.
choppy over the Skype, but.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
but you could feel. I think, anyway, especially on this one, it's a lot smoother looking.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference.
Okay, so that's that, and then no, you take over. You go.
What that means is, on a very simple level, like, here's the circadian lighting thing. It's really straightforward, right? I'm coming out as one 3840 by 1 texture, which I'm just rezzing out 1 by 1, which is just a lookup from a ramp. So this is my circadian lighting, really simple, and I literally just did it this way because, again, the output of these LEDs is completely different than what you would think from the screen. So I just had to sit there for a week and just live with it and adjust this table, try to make it as simple as possible so it was maintainable. But that's a really simple version of this. Now, what that also means is that I can go from 2 dimensions. Oh, this is black right now. So that's a bad example. My movie mode has, this is another example of how from the actual thing is profound. This is actually red. And oh wow,
0.006 brightness.
Yes, but when it's movie night, the fixtures are this deep, beautiful red. There's this value, which
That's hilarious. So that would actually look red on the LEDs would look red in the air.
I don't know if you can see this value here, but it's 0.006
wow.
red. And what this goes into, if I just I can just break this thing because we've already made a broken version of it. But this is going into this matte, a mask where I've made in Photoshop. I literally went into my layup, and I'll get how I made the layup in a moment. But I went in and I made these masters, just the bottoms of the fixtures, just the zigzag, and I'll show you what this looks like. This is, whoops, I got to switch to movie mode. Okay, Skype, don't blow up on me. Where's my controller? So all this is controlled by a React web interface, which I am not running on this machine. So I'm just going to use my little controller talks here, and by a controller that works on any device that's on the local network. But here I'm going to switch to movie mode, and you get, oh, that's a transition. Oh, right, I set this so the transitions happen all the time, but we'll talk about that in a second too. But oh, and I made it white. But here, you get the idea. But the white would be red in movie mode. But you can see that it's only the tops.
Oh, yeah,
and it's
interesting.
only, if I fly in here, it's only the faces of these things that face the audience so that they don't spill on the screen. So you can see that these are black on the side that faces the screen, because this is where the movie screen is. You can see the movie screen up here in this one. So this is just the, oh, God, drunken flying here.
It's mothers against drunk space mousing.
That this is an example of using the matting to create, to take two-dimensional looks down to one dimension selectively. It's happening in 2-dimension. I don't want to get out ahead of that. Let me get into a better example here. These are work lights. That doesn't help.
And I'll say for folks watching, listen, this is going to be a little bit confusing because there's a lot going on. But at the high level, just keep in mind that the big picture is Noah can make content in 3D, we'll get to that, 2D, and these are the tools that we're just showing you different examples, because seeing their input and output kind of explains them better than almost just deep diving, right? So bear with us.
I'm going to go over this forward and back and forward and back and forward and back, and then hopefully it'll come together. But don't forget that we need to end up here, right? So this is what goes out.
Everything has to go down to this 3840 by 1.
In order to get there, we could very simply begin with a solid color and just be going out. I have a res at the other side. I don't even know why this is too. Some of these things I ended up building on site, and I'm not that proud of them.
Yeah.
But anyway, it doesn't matter because this turns into a 3840 by 1 texture that's all the same. But that's if I just do a fit or a res here into 3840 by 1, I can start with anything, a 1 by 1 or a 2 by 2. I don't know why this is 2 by 2, and end up as 3840 by 1. I could do that.
And that works because that content is so simple. That's literally a color square. And that's where the tools come in.
Correct. Now let's start thinking about, this is an example of beginning in 2 dimensions, even though we're doing all one color everywhere. We're using the fact that we're in 2 dimensions to do matting on a per pixel basis. Back this up, and this is a dummy version of this thing. I can show you that I have all these different masks in here where I am putting out, whoopsie daisy, I don't have that many. I'm putting out icosahedra, right? Or just the dance floor icosahedra, I think is what this one is. And then these are the two, these are just these 2 icosahedra over here. Why would I don't know? But what I did was I said, okay, I'm going on site. I have 2 weeks on site, 1 week of which I'm going to set aside to build this thing, actually hang it in the air on a scissor lift with my good friends Ben Gray and David Crumley build this thing. And the other week, I want to spend the entire week being creative and just reacting to this thing in the space. I see myself needing that would allow me to creative on site. Like, for example, I just sat there one day and said, what are all the different ways I could envision wanting to pick out individual fixtures and treat them differently from the rest? Like the dance floor, for example. I might want the dance floor and the 2 points on the top, which I believe is, if you look at a plan view, it's this one I'm calling a point, and I believe this one is just these around the dance floor over here. I could see wanting that. Wanting just the icosahedra or just the octahedra or something like that. So I built this tool that allows me to, first of all, dump out just that output masked in, and it's still coming out in 2-dimensional, right? We'll get to that in a second, but it also has the ability to be other input. And if I put in a constant here and I make this like something like a warning color, like red, and then I pop this in, you're going to see that I can invert the second, like mask to inverse.
Interesting.
So I can either have it, I can have this pop out and show me the opposite on the other stuff, which is just a creative thing. Like I could have 2 inputs where, for example, if I really want the DJ to be highlighted, I have one that only does these fixtures that are over in the DJ booth over here, up here on top of these bleachers, and then the rest of the dance floor behave different. So for every mask, there's an inverse, which is really a useful tool. So this comes out of here as 2 dimensions, right? And then we got to get to 1 dimension, which of course we're going to do with a UV lookup. So this is the position of every node in my entire world in normalized space. And I'll show how I made this in a minute, but you can see that the fixtures are at various heights. Why is this all the same? Because, right, we're doing this, right, so this gets into the 2D, 1D thing, but basically we're looking at this layout essentially as picking this out of the 2 dimensions of this flat layout here, right? So each one of these is a pixel in my installation, and they are all unwrapped and unpacked like that. And this is one flavor of going from 2 dimensions to 1 dimension. It's pretty intuitive for anybody that's done this kind of UV lookup. So this is a really simple place to start to think of, like, one way to go from 2D to 1D is to go from unwrapping all of my fixtures and then just doing a UV lookup in this space by using the position of these things in that normalized UV space. So how did I make that? And this is the thing that I think is coolest. And all credit goes to Lance.
Well, I was going to say,
go ahead.
Jody's here. So our man Jody's here. Jody, what's going on?
I was literally just giving. What up, Jody?
We got to get our shout out to our boy Jody.
Yo, Jody. I want to go in that.
And actually, before you jump into that bonkers thing of Landon, so just for folks that are trying to keep up, so the thing you were just talking about was the idea of you got Photoshop masks that basically turn different parts of the lights on and off for you. So that way when you're passing 2D stuff, you can kind of like say, okay, well, put on the tops, put on the bottoms, put on these ones, not on these ones. Then that feeds into a system where using the actual positions of the light in the space, which you then normalized to do the texture lookup on that map that you made, and then put those pixels in the right order all the way down.
Exactly. Yeah. So where were we doing that? We were in movie mode, I guess. Yeah. So creation in this thing, and one flavor of getting from high dimensional abstraction to low dimensional abstraction. So what this allows me to do is to begin to build an intuition when I'm working in 2D of like which part of the room is represented. And if I were to literally have like a circle fly around on this, which is one of the ways I did the initial test, the circle moving over the surface of these fixtures, these unwrappings are a choice. These things are a math world called nets, N-E-T. And there's a lot of different ways, but you know, it's a creative decision to say 3D net geometry. I think this will work. Like nets of solids. Yeah, here you go. So the term net is the term for basically creating a UV unwrap version of a thing. And as you can see with the cube, you know, you're basically choosing adjacencies, and you're saying, all right, well, if I move through 2D space on a representation of the surface of this cube, where do I want the irregular transitions to happen? So that was a big thing that I had to decide early on about what nets I was going to use to represent these fixtures, and basically where I wanted smooth seams and where I wanted disjoint seams. These are unwrapped onto this texture. It's one thing that I built every flavor of 3D, 2D mapping that I could possibly think of, except the ability to modify the net on these particular UV layups in real time in order to achieve different adjacencies. But that felt like a bridge too far. But what happens here is that this is a really simple, naive way to do this, where this is completely laid out in the room, but it is aware of the surface of the fixtures with a deliberate decision associated with it. Adjacencies are intentional in a certain sense, and if I move something around, for example, like one of the that I did on this when we first built one of the fixtures was on, and this was like months before we actually ordered all the gear and built the full thing. I really want to scroll past this real quick because there's a slob squat. Hi, Burrs.
Oh, yeah. Whoa, right here. Whoa, big boy. Wow.
Burrs in China. Burrs in China. Burrs in Shanghai doing a slob squat.
Look at that hair.
But
Jesus.
So here we go. This is the very first time we put one of these fixtures together, and this was literally just moving a two-dimensional circle, like a circle top, over one of those layups in order to get this kind of swirly look. And I'm deliberately not framing the seams here. This is a seam, and I think the seam is over here of this icosahedron net because it's a disjunction. You can see it, but I'm covering it. But anyway, you can get this effect just by moving a circle. I mean, we all know how this works. This is how UV mapping works. But anyway, this is the simplest, dumbest version of what we're doing here. Now we can get into the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip 3D for a second. I'm going to get to another flavor of 2D, I believe, which I got to find.
And while you're doing that, we can say hi to our friend David. Thanks for joining us. And, you know, if for the chat, hey, chat, if you got questions,
chat them out.
Put them in the chat. Let us know. We're here. We'll take your questions. We're having a good time.
This effect.
This is a trippy one. This is a trippy one.
This is obviously reaction to fusion, but anybody who's worked with Text 3D is familiar with this. I'm building up multiple layers of this thing over time, and so this is a version of a 2D effect that's being brought into 3D space. So with this one, I don't know what number this is. It says 12. Let's see if it's actually 12. Yes. Okay. So we're going to see a transition here. Looks like it's just a crossfade. That's a boring transition, but here we go. And now we're on reaction to fusion, and it is really dim. So let me, again,
and that's what you're saying, because those things in the club would still be pretty.
Are so bright. I just cranked it up just so we could see, but yeah, my vibe is grown and sexy. That was the vibe I was going for. But anyway, you can see that these things are, in a certain sense, spatially aware. They're moving. It appears that time is on this axis across the shallow width of the room, and that the slice of what we were looking at in the Text 3D is on the up and down and deep axis of the room going down the long way of the room. Well, in here we are doing a 3D lookup into this where I have control over, and actually it's on the talks here, what orientation we're going to treat this information as. So if you envision this being a cube and we're doing like an MRI slice of this, we're saying, okay, now I'm painting. I mean, time is one of my dimensions because I'm not doing 3-dimensional reaction diffusion. I'm doing 2-dimensional reaction.
But your slices become time.
But what I'm saying is, exactly, yeah. So my time axis is across here, and then or across this way in this orthographic view, and then my texture that I'm making is going this way, and so this appears to have spatial awareness and continuity in the room. So this is an abstraction that I made that was critical to do anything 2D in 3D. Using time as one of my third dimensions. So I can do these 2D processes in 3D and have that have cohesion and be something that I am painting across the room in real time. So that's a flavor of 2D going to 3D, and then we get into actually doing 3D. And the simplest version of this that I can show you is just, where are my test patterns? Right, so my test patterns, I have...
Is that where the sphere was? The sphere one was a super sick one.
Yes. So this, I actually don't know where my test patterns are on my map any longer because all these are on the controller. I don't know. Oopsie daisy. So the sphere thing I'll get to in one second, but I just want to show that this is a shader that is doing, I'm just going to dive into this shader. Where is it? This one.
Oh, this is the noise one, right?
I'm trying to remember what I did. No,
sorry, the UV, but over the text 3D, so it's in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a 3-dimensional, like just writing UVs with a Z, and I'm moving them over time so that they march around the room a little bit. But again, same process. This is going into a text 3D that is then doing this 3-dimensional lookup in where I've normalized the node's world space. So here are all the octas, here are all the icos, and we'll get again into how these are positioned in a second because we forgot to dive into the fixtures. But because you interrupted me when I was giving kudos to Landon Thomas.
Landon gets enough kudos. I give Landon enough kudos. He was on street. He wore a pirate. He was wearing a pirate Snapchat filter for like 40 minutes, a zombie one for 30 minutes. Landon gets kudos. Don't worry about Landon's kudos.
Anyway, you can see that this chop right here has XYZ positions for all 3840 of my pixels. Normalized, well, they get normalized in here into a range of 0 to 1, which with magic numbers of like how big is my room actually in the units that I'm using here. And then I have those world positions, and again, we're just doing a UV lookup here into a 3D texture that is coming in. This is a 3-dimensional texture that is this, and that results in these things having some kind of spatial awareness where, again, if you look at these orthographic renders, you'll see that there's these kind of lines. I have a lot of blur on this right now, which is not helping, and I think my blur UI fell off the screen. But you can see that there's these crisp lines and that are moving across the room on each of the 3 axes over time, which is a great test pattern for making sure that my lights are oriented correctly, et cetera, et cetera. I also made a test pattern that like on my fixtures, so I have like a green light that points towards the far end of the room and everything. So when I was actually hanging the fixtures, I could make sure that they were right. Yeah. But okay, so that's a flavor of full-on 3D. And you asked for the sphere thing. Let me see if I can find it. And just to give
people like a way to visualize that, and Owen just joined us. Thanks for joining us, my friend. Welcome. They could almost imagine that 3D UV color cube is like in the air, moving and doing stuff, and that your lights are basically sampling from points in that 3D space, in that like field almost. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you could imagine the entire world here being a 1x1 cube, which obviously is not a great fit because this is longer than it is and it's very shallow. But I've actually normalized 0 to 1 space in the y-axis, begins at the bottom tip of this lowest fixture and goes to the highest point of the highest fixture. which is, you can see in this view, it's from like here to here. That's 0 to 1 in this axis. And then this is 0 to 1 on this axis. And then if I went to the orthographic view on, I don't know, what's the third one this axis here, from here to here, those are 0 to 1 spaces. So I'm just basically painting 3D textures in that cube. I don't have music playing into this, so this look is screwed up, which is unfortunate. A lot of these looks require music, and I originally built this thing with the ability to operate without music, and it was getting so complex to make every look work for music or no music that I ended up killing the no music option. But anyway, so these looks are kind of volumetric in that sense. Let's get into how that works, because this is the thing that I think is the coolest nugget of this thing. I started this bit of the process a year before I began this project, like a year before I began installing, because I knew that it was going to be difficult, and I asked Landon for help on this mind-shattering part, which he turned around a chunk of this network that I'm about to show you in about an hour, and it took me like 4 hours to decipher what he had done, and to this day I'm still blown away.
And I think that you also asked me, and I was like, what if we didn't do that? That was pretty sure that was my answer. You were like, oh, how do we do this thing? And I'm like, what if we don't do that thing? What if we don't? What if we just make it easy?
This would be dead in the water.
There you go.
I mean, why make it easy? We wouldn't be in this business if we wanted easy. Anyway, watch this go down here.
It's insane.
It's incredible. If you're into parametric networks, hold on to your butts. So we start with this sphere that then gets faceted into the icosahedron. All right, icosahedron. Already, I love it. If you're familiar with Felix Loretta's Platonic Solids piece from the Touch Designer forums from like 8 years ago, you will recognize this process of faceting to get Platonic Solids, but you should check that out if you haven't seen it. So what we then do is we have this simple Platonic solid, in this case the icosahedron. He's then going to unwrap the entire thing onto a single point. So each of the primitives are now laid up like so, and then we're going to cache the z angle in the primitive SOP here. So we're going to store that z angle in a custom attributes because we're going to need it later. Okay, now we have an error. I don't know why. Object undefined outside of cook. Well, screw that. Then we're going to rotate all of them so that they are facing up. And then we're going to lay them out onto a net where this net is defined manually, essentially, by beginning with a grid and moving some things around. And it can really be that simple. And this kind of thing, like, this was one of the things that kind of shattered my mind, because like in my mind, like I knew where I needed to be. But the thing about parametric networks is like, it's kind of like using Photoshop. Like people look at the result of a Photoshop project and they're like, that's unbelievable. How did you do that? But if they actually watched you do it, they would be like, oh, well, yeah, like step by step. Like, oh, that thing looks weird. Just
no, that's a perfect way to describe what this is.
Yeah. So not taking anything away from how incredible this is, but here we have the net now. We've unwrapped the fixture while keeping the original primitives and storing their original transform. And then what we can do is normalize it. We can texture it. And believe me, I fretted over what kind of texturing I was going to do here a whole lot in order to get where I needed to be. But here we go immediately. Now we already have the net, and we can send this out textured. This is our net. This is ready to go out if I need this for any kind of UV textured net. But of course, we want to put this back together. So then we need to take the all the primitives and rotate them back using the stored information, right? This is this stored. And there's also, like this expression is another example of like, when you see the expression, you're like, God, that's hideous. But also, yes, of course, like there's a lot you need to say, and this is actually how you have to do it. And if you come from a Houdini background, like this might not be that crazy to you to see this kind of process going down. But, it's possible to use Touch Designer and not really appreciate parametric work this way. But anyway, in comes this essentially a template to put these primitives back where they need to be. And so now we have the fixture, but it is now textured in the way that I wanted it textured, and I can still get a UV unwrapped version of it. And I can now refer to this thing in all the different ways that I need to refer to it. I then took this mind-shattering thing that Landon had done and did it for my nodes and I did it for the octahedrons, which was just really kind of a great exercise to like make sure that I understood what he had done. And then out we come, and again, what we have coming out of these are, ignoring the top context stuff, we have a UV textured primitive, we have UV textured nodes in 3D space, and we have the UV textured nets, both for the primitives and for the nodes. And these are the secret sauce that then go into all of the shit that I need to do. These are just for previs. I probably should have broken those out somewhere, but these make the fixtures that I then refer to everywhere else in this project in order to get at those things that we were talking about, like the ability to go from 2D to 1D. We're pulling this
it's all the data
out in order to go. Exactly. Oh, and I also, we talked about the matting earlier. I have the exact same thing built in one dimension because, and the way that I generated these was actually to just pass in black and white
into the 2D one,
my two-dimensional map, and just grab the output and save it as a TIFF. So then I have all these in one-dimensional as well, because sometimes I want to mat these things. I want to do the exact same matting operations in one dimension, like, for example, for my transitions, which we should talk about. But I hope that makes sense, that process created what we are looking at everywhere. Like, those fixture primitives are the core of everything that I'm doing in this entire project, in 2D, in 1D, in 3D, in world space, in normalized space.
It's the linchpin of the whole thing.
All
is
up
like
and down,
this thing.
the linchpin of the whole thing. And so, for example, like if we got to the point where we were going to build this project, like actually physically put it up, and we went, oh shit, like let's say the leads on the inside of the fixture are too short to reach from one face or the other, or something like that, and we need to rework that way. We could have done that in one spot because it's all centralized. We're not like reinventing the wheel over and over. I did like instance texturing tests. So we got into all these different kinds of. Every time I walked my dog for months when I was working on this project, I would staring up at the sky and thinking to myself, like, what version of texturing this thing have I not thought of? Like, what tool could I possibly use to create color on these fixtures at a high level abstraction that I haven't implemented? And this is one of the ones that I'm most proud of, is what I call faux lighting. This obviously is not my invention, but like the way that I got this done required a lot of headbanging. For what I've done here is I picked all my lights in space, and I have used a shader that I don't want to say that I wrote this, but I feel like I did.
That's close enough for me. Just
no, I didn't.
Let's be real.
There was a really old forum post about this. I'm trying to remember how I did this, because this was like one of the most anguishing things that I did. But basically what happens is this geometry comes in and it gets rendered out as this. And this matches dead nuts on to my 2D UV map that I have that mapper for, that I showed you earlier, that I have matting tools for, etc. But it does it in the shader, in the vertex shader. It's going to unwrap all of my shit. And I have different types of projection that I can do on this, where I can, where is this thing? I honestly, like, this was an insane exercise to get these two things to map. And I think you helped me with this, because there was some like weird lighting stuff. But basically what I'm doing is these are reflective, and I'm using an environment map to make a fully reflective version of these, so that I can use volumetric environments. I can use sphere environment maps, things like that, in order to texture the outside of these things in a way where it is cohesive on the outside of every fixture. Now, unfortunately, due to the limitations of this type of rendering, there is still a perspective here. There is still a camera. Yeah. So if I move the camera, there is distortion on the surface of these things. And what I ended up doing was I instantiated using a what's it called? Here you go. Replicator, right. I make a camera for every fixture, and that camera is close
That's
to the
awesome.
fixture. And then in here, I'm doing camera picking, where I pull the camera index on a vertex basis. So for every fixture, I write in which camera it should be rendering with, and each one of these is being rendered with a different camera in order to minimize that distortion. Because if I use a camera in the middle of the room to render for the perspective of this environment map, some of these things get really distorted, and this was the best way to address that. It's still not perfect. I'm not in love with it because I really wanted to use this faux lighting thing that I'm doing in order to create like disco ball looks and stuff like that. But anyway, this was critical. So this was me like in my texture tests thing here, going like, I'm months out, I'm 6 months out, I'm only gonna have a week on site. I have no idea what it's like to be in the room with these things. I have no idea how bright they are. I have no idea how much is too much motion, too much change in color. I know I don't want green. I didn't mention that, but like one of my principles for this project was I never want to see these things go green ever. I hate green light on people. I think it's hideous. I hate green LED light, but that's irrelevant. But anyway, I knew that I was gonna have to do all this stuff on site in the moment, reacting to the space while they were literally under construction. And while all the kitchens were commissioning and all these chefs were like getting in there for the first time and cooking for the first time, and like I knew it was going to be a stressful environment where basically I was going to be going overnight and just making the most of my time. And so what I wanted to do was build as many versions of these tools: the matting, the 2D, the 3D, the different kinds of texturing, the different kinds of UV layups, the different kinds of transitions which we didn't look at, all these things, so that I could have this modular system, and then I could just go in and just take my source thing, which all I need to do, again, reminder, is just end up here. And as long as it has an out one in it, it's going to show up in my list, and I can just switch to it. And I could just be creative. And so I ended up making like 28 of these things and only cutting it down to 18. And when I reached 28, I was honestly like scratching my head, like, what else have I not done? And to be honest, I have this commission outstanding for more of these looks, and I'm kind of like creatively like out of ideas. I can do iterations of these ideas, but like I really like, like I said, I got fluid shaders, I got, reaction diffusion, I've got, 3D volumetric shaders that are written entirely in GLS. I'm not saying I've creatively exhausted the entire terrain of what's possible, but I am saying that in my ability to get outside of where I was in this project, I felt creatively wrung out by the time I left after a week, because I had made all these tools before I showed up. I even had things like this where it's like, this thing is really dumb, but all it does is it makes either a per fixture or a per triangle basis solid colors, where I can light up like one triangle at a time. So this contributes to this Mondrian thing, which is what it's actually, I thought was like totally tacky and kind of out of keeping with the rest of the piece, but like everybody loves it, so it's in here. But this one we call a Mondrian look because it just lights up like bright colors. Yeah,
that's a good one.
So this one is doing 3D reshading of this thing where it wipes out all of the, this needs to be even brighter. It wipes out all of the color and then fades it back in or draws it back in volumetrically in space to add interest. And I'm sorry you guys can't see this at full frame rate because they're nice and smooth and super cool and like wiping through the room and everything like that. But this is driven by a really stupid thing. It's really, really dumb. All it does is like, I have a shader that knows that each of these panels has 15 pixels on it, the part that's not commented out here. And it also knows that there are, oh, this is the ramp that's going up. Don't worry about that. But it knows how many of my picks, how many of my, oh no, this one doesn't actually know. This one's even dumber.
This one just is every 15 where the next one.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, just a random color, literally, like it's made by a noise. Like this is it, So stupid simple, but really satisfying. And like I would not have stumbled on this had I not already, because I didn't want to be doing this kind of shit on site where I'm scratching my head over like, oh, floor, how do I? Yeah, it's off by one, and I'm up on a ladder, like looking at my thing, which is why I built this previs, so I could like, go. And if I my blur UI just went away, but like if I turn off the blur, you'll see that each of these is actually a single pixel, and you can kind of still see it anyway. And I would literally like fly up to these things and just be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, good. Like, am I bleeding off this thing or not? And all that tooling totally served the purpose of being like the only dev on site, making the most out of a commissioning week where like commissioning wasn't just putting on pre-validated looks that the client had already signed off on. It was like full-on creative experimentation, 12 hours a night, every night, in there by myself, pumping music, like imagining what is this club going to be like when it opens, and like not writing a lot of code. Although, you can see there's crap all over this thing that I wrote while I was sitting there all cracked out that I like commented out and stuff like that. But there wasn't that much of it. I wasn't reinventing the wheel. So I could be like, this is dumb. Fluids is like a dumb thing to be deploying in this thing, but I have it. Let me just try it. And, just trying out all different kinds of flavors of this thing to try to create as many different ideas as I possibly could. And reacting to the moment. Like this DJ indirect thing, I think, is really cool and was totally a reaction to the moment. I just want to show this. Is using the mat. I think DJ indirect is like number 15 or something. Yeah. So, and I don't have a view that gets really close to it, so I may have to fly over there. But and I should show the transitions in a moment, because we're always doing transitions, but we don't always do transitions. But you can see that the DJ lives up here, and that these 2 pixels, we're actually looking from the back of the room here. If I switch to the front of the room, you can see that we don't see anything. We don't see anything from this space, but these 2 are shining off the back wall. And all these are audio reactive, so they're really not doing what they normally would do. But this is actually, we're facing from the back of the room forward here, and this red that you're seeing is actually shining off the back wall behind the DJ to create indirect light. And this one that's in front of the DJ is also glowing on their face sometimes as well to just light up the DJ. That's just it turned out to be super tasty, like really worked out well on site, and was possible because I had already gone through and spent a day doing these Photoshop mats, which was a real pain in the butt, and I wouldn't have been able to do on site. I would have lost a day. What was the thing I wanted? Oh, the transitions. So underneath all this, there's a switcher. All those one-dimensional textures are actually coming in here. And really simply, like I'm just switching from one to the, where's the actual 2? Yeah, from, where the hell are they? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, this, select 1, select 0. This is just an A/B switcher, but there are these transitions that act as mats to these. And currently I have my transitions set to fire absolutely every time, which I normally wouldn't do. Oh no, I have them on 10% of the time. Okay, so 10% of the time, a 10-second transition will play down when I switch looks. And this is in service to the thing that we were talking about before we started diving into the project, which is like, how do we make this thing have a rich inner life and like live on for years and surprise and delight? Well, first of all, I made a rule that absolutely every one of my looks has to have a durational component that plays out over an extremely long time that is contingent on another durational component that plays out on an extremely long different time frame, so that the 2 of them are moving against one another and kind of the thing never repeats. That's in every look, but also with these transitions, 10% of the time we're going to do some kind of transition, and I should probably change it up to 100% of the time so that we actually see some here. But they're pretty straightforward, and what they do is they mat out one to the other over that A/B transition, so that when we change looks, we get sometimes like a bright white line that goes across the room, or like one triangle at a time winks out, or it goes all the icos and then all the octaves, or
that's a nice one.
Fixture at a time, or crossfades or whatever the hell it is. All these different things. This is icos and then octaves, I think. I don't exactly know what's going on here, but anyway, you get the idea. And these are popping because I'm doing them before the transition is over. I apologize for that. But anyway, the transition system is like another thing that I deliberately built into this that was intended to surprise and delight and make these things do things once in a while, because there's a dozen transitions or something, and they only happen 10% of the time, and the looks only change every 3 minutes or something like that if they're on auto rotate. It makes it so that you feel like you never have a handle on what this thing is capable of, what it's doing.
And I think that's like a big part, not only just that concept, but this idea that, we didn't talk about it that much, but you spent a lot of time really early in production building tools and like the tooling. And like you're saying, like, that sweet component that Landon put together, which was in generative format, making your geometry, unwrapping it, texture, rewrapping it, like providing you the data set.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do that, right? Like
a year.
Technically, there's projects that we've been on where somebody bakes that out and says, here's the little thing. Have fun, and that's like the week before we get to the job site. But you're saying, so you did this a year ago.
Well, so that gets to the point of this project. So this project I did on cost. I like lost money on this project because when the client came to me with it, I said I would love to do this. I'm honored. I'm really glad you like my stuff, and I'm excited to do this with you. you don't have enough money for this. You have enough money to get it done, but you don't have enough money to make this commercially worth it. So I will do this in exchange for full creative control. And to their credit, they said, okay. And then they stuck to it. Like, they gave me full creative control throughout the entire project. And that put the heat on me. First of all, they gave me a lot of trust. So I was like, I got to deliver here, A. And B, it put the heat on me to make it worth it to me. You know, like, I was like, if I'm doing this for creative control, then I got to get
well, it's got to be creatively worth your while,
if I'm going to get creative, 100%. And if it's going to be creatively worth my while, then I need to set myself up to win. And that's how we get to the tooling. And the tooling was just like, I need to make it so I can be creative in the short time that I'm out in Boulder. I have 2 weeks to build and commission this. Fortunately, we got it installed in 3 days. Unfortunately, they were not ready for us when we got out there, and we moved the whole trip like 5 times already. And when we got out there, they weren't ready. And then they had done the mount plates for us, and the mount plates were in the wrong place. So we lost a couple days. We got them up. Fortunately, they worked perfectly. Kudos to David Crumley for doing the LED engineering on this. If you need LED engineering, hit me up. I'll hook you up with David. He's a genius. All that stuff worked right away. And so we got these hung up, and it was really painless to put them up. We took 2 days to hang all these fixtures, touch them up with a little bit of paint, and then I set up my table, and I was just getting creative for 8-9 days, every night, chilling, you know, no hiccups, no problems like that. And the hue thing that came in, I should show that as well, that came in at the last minute didn't turn out to be a big deal because I was already in a great creative place, or I was already in a great technical place, having tooled up. I just want to show the hue thing that I'm talking about. This is a string sim in 2 dimensions. See that? To make these kind of interference patterns that go across these. I can change, again, the mapping on this from 3D to 1D by, you know, changing the orientation of this. But every one of these things, this is probably not the best example. Let me get to a simpler one. Every one of these things has 2 outputs, actually. It has the output for the fixtures, and it has an output for the hue lights. And so these are the same because of cocktail time. But if you look at, like, for example, any of these that have a vibe, it's normally going to be a complementary color. So where this thing is outputting, this is too dark to see because I like it dark in there, but this is this kind of reddish color. That looks like a terrible combo, but in person it's probably fine. But let me see. Frequently it's like blue and yellow, or like teal and yellow. And if you look actually at the footage that we were looking at earlier, you see what I'm talking about, that like if we go to the wide shots and like in any of these looks, you'll see that the lights and these are the hue lights everywhere, that they're complementary. And so I'm just driving those hue lights by normally just kind of picking a color, but in some cases I built a color system. I actually don't know where my color system is, but I have like a color engine in here that takes in a primary color and then spits out secondary colors and tertiary colors and complementary colors, and, you know, where's my color tool? Oh, these are all the tools.
That's a lot of tools. I think that's the interesting part about this is I think it's really easy for a lot of us to get stuck in the idea that we're working, and then when we go to the job site, we're still working and installing at the same time. And then you get in that trap where it's like, well, I have no time to like actually be creative. I can't actually like play with this in real life. I'm basically like fixing bugs, or, you know, like you were saying, trying to get the color to look right, or, oh, I realized I didn't, this thing that I thought I didn't have to do, now I have to build a transition system, now I have to do this, now I have to do this. And then you get to the last day and you're like, let me quickly, like, you know, poop out a couple looks here and call it a day.
Yeah, dude, and that's the whole thing. I mean, just set yourself up to win. And you can't do that on every job, but like, to me, it was really important to get my creative bang for my buck out of this thing, because that's really what I sold my sweat on, you know, for me, like, to be able to do all that work for almost nothing for 2 years. Again, position of privilege to be able to do that at all, but I had to make it worth my while, because I lost a lot of sleep over this job. Oh, what was the story? Oh, yeah. So anyway, this is my color system, by the way. You know, this is different kinds of complementary and, you know, whatever. And you can, with this color thing, you can change the number of colors. So if you look at what's coming out of this, does it come out on the, no. Let me just do it on the printer here. You can just like say, I want more colors. And, you know, look
at that. That's cute. But, you know, you should release a little component-y thing like that.
Now,
that's very nice.
Of course, when you do this on an LED, it looks ridiculous and stupid. But So I didn't even end up using this thing, I think. But anyway, just tooling up. Anyway, so well, here's what I was going to say. A couple of weeks ago, no, a week ago.
A week ago from now, like a week ago of now, present day.
Yeah,
okay.
Literally a week ago. This thing has been up since I installed it in December, right? Like literally leading up to opening night. I was just like finishing up looks, and I had to leave on opening night. I had been there for 2 weeks, and I had to go. And client is awesome and like has been a dream to work with and everything, and really loves the piece. And I'm glad I delivered for that and everything like that. But they called me and they were like, "Hey, came in this morning." He sent me a video. Came in this morning and like, there's a couple of panels out and one's blinking. And I was like, oh dear. And they were all on one icosahedron. And I was like, gosh, okay, can you check behind the rack? And the guys that the IT team that had installed the home runs that go from the fixtures to the rack did not terminate a lot of the cables correctly, and we knew that. And we had them fix the ones that we were aware of. But I was just like, has anybody been back there? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, let's just go back there behind the rack and just make sure all the cables are in tight, because a lot of them didn't clip into the storm units very well. The ArtNet to the fixtures wasn't clipped in properly. And he checked it and he's like, nah, it doesn't seem to be it. They're still screwed up. The next morning, more panels were out and more were blinking on another icosahedron. And I was like, oh dear God. And I was like, are those on the same circuit? And he was like, no, they're on two different circuits. And I was like, are they on the same storm unit? And he was like, they're on two different storm controllers.
I think I know where this is going. I think I know where this is going.
Oh boy. Well, go ahead. Tell me what your guess is.
This is the content. The system, general intelligence kicked in on your system and like it outwitted you. Yeah. No, is that not what happened?
No, that's a reasonable guess. But I looked at the nature of this thing. And some of them are like rainbow blinking and some are just out. And like it wasn't a software thing. It was clearly not coming out of my one-dimensional texture at the end of this thing. Like these were panel-aware behaviors and clusters of panels going out.
Oh, spacebar. That's the best. That's the good. That should have been the first guess. Spacebar. That's it. David wins.
I mean, they were still on schedule, and the machine resets every night and everything like that. But it was progressively getting worse. So every morning for like 4 mornings, more panels were out, always on icosahedron, and more were blinking. And I was starting to kind of freak out. I was like, this is like
custom, custom hardware, right?
I was thinking custom everything that was made in Hong Kong during COVID. It wasn't made during COVID, but now it's COVID. And I'm thinking like, uh-oh. So I'm thinking dirty power. He did tell me there's a major construction project going on next door, that they had to disconnect the power main for the whole block and reconnect it. And that's, maybe. And I did think about, I know pretty much every system in this building because I spent so much time there while we were building it. And I kind of knew like vaguely like what else is in the building. I know that these are pretty much the most sensitive electronics, but I was starting to come to the conclusion that something was progressively frying these things through its transformer, which are nice mean-well transformers that shouldn't, they're not surge protectors, but like they shouldn't be that sensitive. But anyway, the panels are, and at the top of every one of these things is a control box that decodes, in the case of the icosahedron, 5 ArtNet legs, 5 universes of ArtNet into these panels, in like 5 groups. And, I'm just like, I think either the control boards are frying or somehow the panels themselves are frying. Either one, not good, because we got to take these things apart in the air and replace panels and blah, blah, blah. And I was just really starting to lose sleep over this. And I was like, okay, I have a test for you to run. And he's like, okay, he's totally game. He's like, I got to get a big ladder and get up there because he's really high in the air. I got to get up there and patch some cables and figure out what to do. And fortunately, before he did that, he had somebody with him in the restaurant. He goes in the rack and touches behind the rack again, and some of the lights blink. And his friend goes, whoa, and he pokes his head out, and the lights are still off, and some are still blinking, but it doesn't look any different. And his friend goes, those flashed when you did that. And he found out that it was still improperly terminated cables in the back of the rack, and that they had hired a new cleaning guy who was so thorough that he was going in the rack, pulling the rack out every night, and mopping behind it, which was why it was getting worse every night. He was actually straining the entire hob that was going into the rack by yanking the rack out every night and mopping behind it. And it was still those improperly terminated cables. So it turned out not to have anything to do with my system.
That is the most terrifying ending to a story that I ever could have imagined.
It was the best possible ending.
Yeah, all the other endings would have been way worse, but that one is also terrifying.
Oh my God. So bad because the only person I have left on the ground there is Leo, the metal worker who built the aluminum structures for these things, which tons of credit goes to him too, because these are extremely complex. They don't have that many parts to them, but the geometry is really intense. And Leo is an excellent welder and owns a Haas machine, but like is not like a math whiz. Well, he is, but he's not like he's not a geometrician. And he figured these out. But anyway, he's the only guy that I have on the ground there. He doesn't really get the electronics very well, and he doesn't know how to operate the software. So I have trouble getting my head around these things in software. I have trouble getting my head around these things when I'm standing in front of them. But like looking through a phone and like helping him figure out the mapping of a specific tile that he's looking at in the air from like my documents and stuff like that, or using my tools that I can use to light up individual panels would have been awful. Plus ordering new parts from Hong Kong would have been awful, which we're doing anyway. We're just going to reorder the entire system again. Just to keep this thing running in the future.
I'm kind of triggered right now, and do you know why I'm triggered? Is because just like all of real life, especially in our like industry, that was both terrifying and unsatisfying of an ending. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
what would have satisfied you?
Something simple like, oh yeah, cable's broken, swap the cables. Now I don't know. I guess that I don't know, but that would have been a little, I could have slept. I'm gonna be nervous for a little while, like another half an hour at least. If you had a drink of water after that.
I think if there's a moral to the story, it's
don't touch anything ever.
If you have a clean answer, and it doesn't turn out to be the clean answer, double check the clean answer, because like there was no other answer that would have explained this, and like Occam's razor said that it was the cables at the back of the rack, and the client said it wasn't, but it was. Yeah,
I guess that's a tricky one. I guess. And the other way to think about it is always confirm the kill. Because I guess to your point, like if you had said cable and they had said no, and you had said you must test the cable, I guess in some way you would have figured out something is to do with the cables, and you wouldn't have sent people up there to like look at stuff or start losing sleep over like fried LED controllers or anything like that.
I mean, it was like he was actually bringing an electrician to power condition all the circuits that were servicing this. There's only 2 circuits, but he was going to lift these circuits. He still is. He's going to lift these circuits and put a power conditioner on these, because it was a wake-up call for us that like, oh, these are completely unprotected from like a lightning strike or something like that.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's very just hearing the story is very stressful, but I'm glad it's not like fried electronics or like broken systems.
And like everybody I talked to was like, oh, maybe it was heat, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, these things have been in the air for 10 months. Yeah. They've been through the summer. They went up in winter. It's fall now in Colorado. They're not running the heat or the AC, and they're not in the sun like they were in the summertime. That can't be it. Why would they all be dying in a cascade every night, if it was like a slow heat death thing?
Well, I think that puts us in a pretty good place, because we're at 2:12, so we're kind of like getting overtime. So if you have any final questions for us, folks in the chat, please let us know, and we'll try and get to those real quick on our outro. I know Brandon's saying, working in the 600 frame world, I see. So your timeline. I mean, who changes that? Who changes that? Brandon, do you change that? I don't change it. I just leave it at 600.
I actually have I can show you. I have I actually don't even know how much I use this, but I built this like mega oscillator, kind of like a modular synth.
Because I think that's what Brandon was asking about, was, what's the careful process of having those long increment signals that aren't related to the timeline.
Well, if you're using a movie player that's locked to timeline,
I can't see it. If you use Touch Designer and you're using the timeline, we gotta have a little conversation after.
I'm just an LFO guy. Like, these are all made out of LFOs. Like everything that's not a sim. Like there's these like reaction fusion fluid, string sims, blah blah blah. But like stuff that is just like spinning, like this faux lighting thing, that I call the disco ball, which is this unwrapped thing that we were talking about. Like that rotation is just somewhere in here. There's just an LFO. Like obviously, I don't know where the hell it is, but it's probably in here. Yeah. So somewhere, or I just use abstime.seconds or something like that. Oh, by the way, this is a cool pro tip that you would only find out the hard way. If you use abstime.seconds, I learned this on another piece that I did with David Crumley. I did the lights at KEXP.
Oh, cool.
in the background. If you watch
Yeah, yeah.
KHD's live shows, that was me, David Crumley, and Michelle Higa. I got a call from the client. Like, we did not set that machine to reset every night.
Overflow.
I got a call from the client. Yes, I got a call from the client like months in. Like, some of these looks are getting like really steppy and kind of crunchy. And it turned out that I was using abstime.seconds without modding it back down into, or no, lapse time or something. Yeah, I think I had a count or something like that. But yeah, it was a memory leak going. Yes, so I had like, or not a memory leak, it was a memory overflow. I was using like a number that was just way too big.
Because that's what I was gonna say is there's no real like good way, because either you have to make your timeline like really long, or you have to be careful that if you're just generating ramps, that if you don't have like resets regularly in the system, eventually those numbers are just gonna become like crazy and then stop working, which is like something you never really talk about.
Exactly.
It's not like a sexy topic that like comes up in regular conversation, but 6-digit precision, that's a big thing you can look up if you're interested in learning more about it.
Right. You can either do the boomerang thing where you go up to the end and then come back, or you could have a discontinuity in there and just like acknowledge that like on the time scale of months, there will be a discontinuity once in a while.
I think, in reality, that's like probably fine. You just pop it in the middle of the night, like 4 a.m.
If you want to be really nuts, you could like make a thing that like crossfades into another value and then resets your ramp and then crossfades back in or something. But like, and it's just something to think about.
So with that said, that's permanent installation pro tips for real right there. So I don't see any questions coming in, so we can do our little bit of wrap up. Let me go back to our side-by-side view here. First of all, I mean, thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a super busy dude, so 2 hours of your time on a work day is a big commitment. So
it was fun. Well, originally you invited me to play video games, and then you
well, we didn't tell anybody about that yet. Okay, so I don't know. It's a fun side note. We are planning a touch designer developer stream of Among Us. It'll be me, Matthew, Noah, a bunch of people. We're trying to plan it. We were straight up gonna do it like today at lunch, and then we got like everyone got real busy with like real stuff. And then we didn't end up planning it. So it's on the horizon. We should be doing an Among Us.
And then you were like, why don't you talk about a piece that doesn't work that's like a year old? And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll get that working. Yeah. I don't remember how it works.
And then it was pretty late last night too. I don't remember what time, but like we're like, I knew I was in full lean. Yeah, I was in full lean, and we're like, why isn't it working? Delete the audio part.
ASIO for all doesn't work.
ASIO's not working. Yeah. So that will be coming soon, folks. You'll hear about that when we're going to plan it, probably in the next week or two. But anyways, Noah, thanks, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Good times. Thanks everybody for watching.
It's fun. How can people find out more about your work? I mean, let's throw all those links into the chat. Are you guys? I think you're watching the YouTube chat, right? You see it?
I paused it because I don't think it was working very well. But I see the chat.
Yeah. Because you've got hardwork.party, which is your website. You've got your Instagram. If you want folks to hit you up, either they can hit me up at, I think I got the text somewhere here. Don't know if I have the text. I can make the text, but I'll put the text up, support@interactiveimmersive.io, and then I can forward you on to Noah so you don't get like spam. Or if you want to post your email, by all means. It's all you. Thanks.
I got a great contact form. Let's put it that way.
You got a which?
I got a great contact.
You got a great contact form. There you go. Yeah. So just hit up.
It's not that I don't want any of these people to contact me. Of course.
Yeah, it's the bots and stuff like that.
It's YouTube. Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Hit them up. Thanks everybody for watching. I see you all in there. Owen, Rajat, David, Brandon, Aurelian, Stove. Everyone. Thanks for everybody for joining us.
I got one thought to leave you.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to say, what's your send off?
Yeah. Think about someone who is on the outside of this industry who you can bring in. Find a way to make an opportunity for someone this year, 2021. Make it a project. Find someone that you can make an opportunity for. A woman, a person of color, somebody marginalized otherwise, gender identity, whatever it is, or just access. Just somebody who, just like you, for economic reasons, has the same interests as you do, but just doesn't have the opportunities you do, and just find a way to make space for them. Whether it's on one of your projects or one that you can't take on, or whatever it is, pay it forward. We've all been very fortunate to do this job.
I think that's a fantastic thing, and I'll even just I don't have a send off, so my send off will just be like saying that. Like I think there's a lot of places where that can happen in varying degrees too. So, you know, you don't have to intimidate yourself by thinking, oh, me bringing somebody on means that all of a sudden I completely lose control of the project, or it's going to cost me like $1,500 a day, or like, you know, there's always ways that you can bring people in different capacities, and just that idea of keeping your eyes out, trying to put in that effort of bringing people into the community, I think is an awesome way. And even in small steps are better than no steps. You know, like Christopher Hitchens used to say, you know, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And don't be afraid to try that stuff. I know it feels, like you said, a little bit intimidating sometimes, but just say it outright, like to your client, to your team, to yourself, when you're like, I have a need for help, or I have an opportunity here. How can I make space for someone who is not already inside to come in? It'll be good for all of us to do this, even if you need a selfish reason. There's a selfish reason, but you know, once you've said it out loud, and you just keep repeating it every time the chance comes up, it becomes a normal thing for everybody to just like pause right before you have a seat to fill, and not to just reach for somebody who's already on the inside, but to just draw somebody else in. Rising tide will raise all ships.
100%. And I'd say if anyone is in that situation and you're having trouble navigating, just send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat, the support@interactive-immersive. That comes straight to me. Listen, there's no like support. There's no like offshore support team. Like if you send me an email and you're like, I'm trying to do this thing and I don't know how to like make it happen, we'll hop on a call. I'll get you the info you need.
Yeah, I want to extend that as well. Anybody, if there's anything I can do for you, you know, to help you, you know, succeed, you know, your dreams, whatever.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Help on a project. I'm not as good at helping people with specific things as Elvers is, but if you have like a more nebulous kind of thing that I can help with, I can't debug a patch like Elvers can. I turn.
What can I say? We've all got that. Somebody had to be the fireman chief, and everyone else can not have to worry about fires. So I think that's probably a good place to leave it for today. So thank you, Noah, my friend, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for watching. As always, I believe the recording of this just goes automatically on our YouTube after, so by all means, you can rewind, check it out afterwards. And with that said, thanks for joining us, folks. We'll see you on the next second Friday of the next month, which is, well, that's going to be November 13th, but this Among Us stream thing will happen probably in like the next week or two. Well, don't worry, folks. I'll put it in the ESP air. Oh yeah, and nobody